The man never believed in the story people tell about seeing a light at the end of a tunnel when they almost die. But now, he finds himself in such a tunnel. He wonders how he died, as the last thing he remembers was being in his room, heavy and tired. He starts thinking about how he might have died. He remembers looking down at the city from high up, but then his memory fades to feeling heavy in bed. He questions if he was poisoned or assassinated, knowing too many people wanted him dead. He thinks about all the enemies he had, realizing that after all, he was a king. This realization brings up the title card for the story, the beginning after the end, showing the creative team details. Even though he wants to figure out his death, he decides there is no use dwelling on it now and must just go along with whatever happens next. He hopes it's not some cliché scene with singing babies. Suddenly, bright light surrounds him, and he hears voices congratulating his sir and madam because they have a healthy boy. He realizes with shock that he has just been born. A woman asks someone to hold him out so she can see. The man briefly thinks if the light at the end of the tunnel was actually the light from a woman's, but stops himself, deciding that is not important. He notices that wherever he is, he can understand the language, which is a good sign. He observes the mother's bright, gentle smile and motherly love, thinking how beautiful she is. The father puts the baby's love to the mother The father quickly says, "Never mind." The former king thinks his surroundings seem normal enough, but he is confused about where he is. The scene shifts to show the interior of a rustic room lit by a single candle. He notices various objects around the room, like armor pieces on the floor, and wonders what is happening. He sees his mother holding him and focusing her eyes. He wonders where he is as the next shot shows a view of a simple, thatched roof building from above, surrounded by greenery. Time passes as weeks go by slowly. He observes his new parents, Alice and Reynolds. His mother, Alice, is gentle but keeps tight control over the family, while his father, Reynolds, is dependable and charismatic except for his occasional childishness. Despite being born into a loving family, his new life is full of difficulties he wouldn't wish on anyone, mainly the lack of control over his limbs and bodily functions. He thinks that years of mental discipline as a king and the slight hope that this is all a dream are what keep him sane. It seems he has been transported to the past, to a much more old-fashioned time period as he looks out over a town with older-style buildings. Walking through the market, he sees people carrying weapons openly and vendors selling strange liquids called medicines. His mother suggests they head home because their little Art must be tired, and the baby, realizing knowledge is strength, feels confident about his surroundings after a few weeks of observation. The father comes home happily and asks how his little man is doing, picking up the baby with a big stretch and smile. The father playfully tosses the baby up high, causing the mother to scream in alarm, asking what he is doing and warning him not to drop the child. The baby, despite the shock, feels his fragile body reacting, and the father laughs, saying he used to do this when he was younger, telling the mother the little boy is having fun. The father continues tossing and catching the baby roughly, making the baby dizzy and causing the mother to yell at him to stop. The father is then shown looking stunned. The father makes a strange choking sound, and the baby finally starts crying loudly with a harsh sound. The mother quickly takes the crying baby, comforting him and saying he is okay and that she will fix him up. She gently touches the baby's foot, and a green light glows from her hand onto him, making the baby look surprised as she says, "There, all better." As the mother holds him up happily, the baby reflects that he spoke too soon, realizing he still knows nothing about this new world. In his past life, the character was a king, standing proudly on the castle walls. He remembers leading armies and winning duels against people from all over the world. Even with all those great achievements, he states that nothing made him prouder than this current moment. Now, looking at his cute baby self, he is very happy, thinking he can crawl. The baby, Art, starts crawling, making his parents, Alice and Ray, immediately rush to look after him. Ray is told to watch out for corners, and Alice is asked to stop him from going near his shelf. Art looks at his reflection in the mirror and his mother lovingly points it out. He thinks about how his new name, Art, still feels too cute for a former king like him. However, looking at his adorable baby face, he admits to himself that he is indeed very cute, warning future ladies to prepare to be heartbroken. The parents laugh at his silly face in the mirror, and then the title card for the beginning after the end appears, showing the creators' names. After his mother kisses him goodnight, calling him Little Art, the baby boy's mission begins with a cheerful start. Art carefully sets aside his blanket and throws it to make noise, then rests his head quietly before starting to rumble around. With a big bam, Art pops up from the bed, and now that Alice, his mother, thinks he is asleep. He gets ready for his secret activity. He knows he has about an hour before she comes back to check on him. As Art crawls away, his mother is heard humming softly, thinking he is sleeping, but Art is focused on reaching his destination. He whispers that full speed is ahead as he peeks out from a hiding spot. He successfully reaches a desk filled with books and papers, exclaiming success. With a happy baby grin, he explains that ever since he found this secret spot, he sneaks out every night to learn more about this new world called Pikathan. The map shows the continent is made up of 3 major kingdoms. The first kingdom shown is Alenwar, the land of the elves, deep in the forests. Next is Darv, the underground kingdom of the dwarves. The third one is Sapin, the human kingdom, which is the most populated area. He notes that both this world and his old one have monarchies, but here, rule is passed down instead of earned. Art found out early that this world is much less developed than his old one technologically, and he realizes the reason is magic. He spots the book he was reading before and thinks, ah, here it is. He opens the book to the page he was on, thinking he left off right there in his studies of magic. He recalls that in his old world, they used a life force called Kai, which practitioners used to strengthen their bodies through hard training. This world has a similar force called mana, but unlike Kai, mana is all around them. The power to control mana is mostly genetic, with only about 1 in 100 children having the ability. Art gets a little rash on his cheek while reading this. He continues reading that mana can be used in many ways, the most common being augmenting and conjuring. Augmenters use mana to make their bodies much stronger and faster, but their reach is limited. Conjurers, on the other hand, send mana out into the world to control things around them, but they need to use mana from the outside world to fuel their spells. His mother was a rare type of mage called a deviant or an emitter, known for unique restorative mana. The book states that a mage's first awakening happens between early adolescence and late teenage years when their mana core appears, which sounds a lot like the Kai Center from his past life. To form a Kai Center, kids in his old world meditated to gather the fragments of Kai inside them. Thinking about this, Art wonders if he can do something similar now, and he closes his eyes in meditation, surrounded by faint green motes of energy. He concentrates hard and a bright light forms in his chest as he focuses, realizing it's working. Suddenly, Art grabs something and is interrupted as his mother, Alice, finds him, looking worried. She asks if he is having trouble doing a poo pie. Art is very upset, proclaiming he was about to start his journey to become the greatest mage, but his parents are focused on his diaper situation. He sighs, realizing that in all his concentration he had actually soiled his diaper. The mother is writing something in her study, surrounded by many books on the shelves. She takes a moment to look at her surroundings, thinking about her baby. She dips her quill in the ink pot and continues writing in her journal. After a little while, she notes that it has been just over 2 years now. She feels like she is learning more and more about her baby every day that passes. Then, she thinks about what conclusion she has reached, as a man, presumably the father, smiles below. The father holds up the baby Arthur, who looks very happy and adorable. The mother then thinks that Arthur has to be the most favorable baby. She looks at Arthur, noticing his little patch of auburn hair and his azure eyes that look at her very intelligently. Because of this, she knows he will get into trouble in the future if she does not become a strict and dependable mother. She realizes that she cannot rely on Ray for being strict, as a hand is shown swinging a wooden stick quickly. Then, the scene shifts back to the mother carrying a basket of clothes. The mother, holding laundry, looks shocked as she sees Ray outside trying to teach little Arthur how to fight with a stick. She seems quite upset about this small training session between father and son. As Ray and Arthur seem to be enjoying their little fight practice, the mother appears behind them with a very angry look on her face, radiating a dark aura. She is clearly furious that Ray is encouraging this behavior. She writes in her journal, recounting that she caught Ray trying to teach her baby how to fight. Her expression softens a little as she notes this happened even when Arthur could barely crawl. The narration continues, setting the scene for a trip outside the house. The next moment shows a clear blue sky, hinting at them leaving the study environment. The mother is now out in the town of Ashbur, carrying Arthur with another person, possibly a guard or an older sibling, nearby. They are walking past buildings, and a sign with crossed swords and a shield catches the eye. She observes that Arthur absolutely loves going to the small merchant's strip in central Ashbur. Because of this, they go downtown every other day instead of just once or twice a week for groceries. Arthur looks with wide eyes as Ray demonstrates some kind of power with his staff, making it burst into flames. The mother, standing by, says she is not smiling at him, then Ray creates a big fiery blast. The mother smiles softly, thinking about how quickly Arthur is growing up and wondering what he will be like when he is older. She then writes again, saying that with Ray as his father, she has no doubt he will be interested in becoming an adventurer. However, she expresses worry about this potential future, as adventurers have a tough life. She hopes he fares better than the naive young teens who hope to make it big as adventurers. She wishes she could do something about Arthur's constant habit of sneaking into the study. She even thinks about moving his crib into the study, but decides that is a thought for another day. The scene cuts back to the study, where a hand is seen wiping the table with a cloth. A feather quill is also shown being picked up or put down. This part shows the title card for the beginning after the end, along with credits for the novel, script, artists, and quality control. A final shot shows the mother standing near the desk again. The scene shifts to young Arthur standing by a bright window, looking out. He has a small, thoughtful expression on his face. Ray takes off his outer layers, showing his arms, as he prepares for something. The narration states that approximately 2 years have passed since he first made his difficult journey to the study. Ray reflects that he has learned a lot since then, but it is still fascinating learning new things every day. Arthur is seen peeking from a doorway, watching Ray intently. He stands with his arms spread wide, focusing on the ground in front of him, where small rocks are scattered. One of the rocks slowly begins to lift off the ground. Ray concentrates hard, and the air around him seems to vibrate with power as the rocks continue to be affected. Arthur looks on with surprise, wondering what sort of magical phenomenon he will conjure. The rocks shoot upwards with a loud sound, and Arthur stares up in shock at the chaos above him. He is clearly taken aback by the display of power. The strong man was showing off his power in the yard, making rocks float in the air with a grand gesture. Then he dropped into a low stance, ready for action. He launched himself forward with a huge roar, landing hard on the grass with a puff of dirt. The little kid watching from inside looked totally unimpressed by the whole display. The father came inside, smiling proudly at his wife, who looked on with a knowing expression. He then boasted about his power, feeling like a star. He then puffed out his chest, asking if the child saw how awesome his daddy was. But the kid, looking small and annoyed, questioned the point of throwing something with so little effort after just 3 minutes of focus. The mother gently petted the child's head while he watched his father. She then sighed and said that the father had ruined the front yard again. Meanwhile, outside, the father was seen pulling something with great force, showing off his raw strength in the grass. He was putting all his might into this pulling action. The mother looked at her baby, who was watching her with big, innocent eyes. The child then started wondering what kind of monocore he would have when it finally awakened. The father stood tall and firm outside, focused, while a single leaf drifted down near his feet. He seemed ready for anything. The small leaf kept floating down, landing gently on the ground with a soft tap. It was a stark contrast to the rough display happening elsewhere. The father's gaze sharpened, and he suddenly threw a punch with intense speed. A powerful rush of air followed the blow. The punch moved incredibly fast, followed by powerful kicks that created streaks of air distortion. He was really putting on a show of force. The impact landed with a loud thud, showing the sheer force of his movement. His face showed a look of exertion and surprise at his own strength. Finally, he landed flat on his back with a loud whoosh, ending his aggressive display. Back inside, the mother took a quick sip from her cup, seemingly unimpressed by the commotion. The little boy peeked out, looking curious about the outside world for a moment before resting his head down, his eyes closing peacefully for a nap. He looked incredibly cute while resting. The child was then shown sitting up in a dark room, looking at a tiny flying bug. Later, the mother was sitting downstairs, and the boy was looking up at her from the steps. The boy suddenly felt scared, looking up into the dark space above him with wide, anxious eyes as a sound echoed down. He seemed very frightened of something high up. He looked down with a worried expression, his mother's shadow visible near his feet on the floorboards. He was clearly feeling very uneasy. The boy slowly crawled up the stairs towards his mother, his body shaking slightly with fear. His mother looked down at him with a gentle, concerned expression. She noticed his sleepy state, telling him his eyes were half closed. "Baby." Then she kissed his head, saying it looked like someone needed a nice nap. She held the little boy close as he settled into her arms. He then pointed and asked for books, but she gently told him no, that it was nap time. She smiled and offered maybe after the nap, but the boy decided he had no choice but to resist being put to sleep. He pushed against the cover to stay awake. The child then made an adorable, sparkling face, begging his mama for books. His intense cuteness made the mother's eyes pop, and she seemed almost overwhelmed. She pushed back against his playful resistance with a surprised shout. Then, the mother groaned in frustration as the child kept stubbornly pushing against her. Finally giving in, the mother agreed, okay, you can play in the study for a little bit. She then turned away, muttering that she was not a doting mother, but that boys his age needed a lot of play, so she had baby-proofed the room. The child thought to himself that it wasn't demeaning for a great warrior to use every tool in his arsenal, even using his cuteness. He was then shown sitting in the study, looking at an open book. The mother stood near the doorway, watching him with a soft smile. Then, there was a sudden loud crash from somewhere else. The mother rushed out, worriedly saying, "Oh no, your father better not have knocked down another tree." She told the boy she would be right back. Art. The perspective shifted to the child focusing internally, realizing that his biggest achievement, besides learning about this world, was his progress in forming his Ma core. He was shown sitting cross-legged in meditation. The baby was sitting in concentration, a small glow forming in his chest while reading a book. He had spent the last 2 years moving countless tiny fragments of mana inside his body. He was gathering all these fragments near his solar plexus, a process he realized would naturally take until adolescence due to the slow movement of the mana fragments toward his body's center. He was clearly very focused. The view then pulled back to show the bright blue sky outside, contrasting with the dark room where he was meditating. He knew the effort was tiring for both mind and body. He continued to focus, recognizing that these 2 years had not been wasted at all. He was shown concentrating deeply, a faint glow on his chest. He declared that he was almost there, right at the edge of success. A bright, intense light filled the space, signifying a breakthrough. Outside, the father was struggling to carry a huge log while the little girl watched, smiling happily. Then 2 birds flew high in the clear blue sky. He focused on achieving that just one last piece. The scene dissolved into darkness, showing several bright, gathering points of light within. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the area with a huge boom, throwing debris everywhere. The mother was thrown back by the force of the blast. The focus snapped to the father moving incredibly fast, dashing away from the explosion. He was seen pulling the mother and child with him in a speedy escape. With an intense SSSSHHH sound, the father shielded his family as they shot forward, engulfed in a blinding golden light from the explosion behind them. He was moving at an incredible speed to protect them. Someone quickly dashed forward, moving so fast like a streak of light, trying to save someone from a bright flash. A man managed to grab a woman just as a huge explosion or bright light burst nearby, showing he took the brunt of something to protect her. The motion blurs show a huge burst of energy or speed, with the man protecting the woman as they went through the impact. After the blinding light faded, smoke or fog started clearing up, and some glowing particles floated in the air. The man, looking a bit beaten up, held the seemingly shocked or unconscious woman close and asked if she was okay, calling her honey. The woman slowly came to, called out for Art, and then screamed Art. Again with wide, shocked eyes. She shouted that Art was still there and reached out, confirming the boy was safe despite the destruction. A close look at the man's face showed his eyes wide with shock or surprise, even though he had cuts on his face. The focus shifts back to movement, with a dash sound effect as if someone is moving with extreme speed again. The injured man dashed forward into the wreckage, pushing aside debris under a bright yellow sky. The scene fades to black with only a few glowing embers floating down, suggesting the immediate danger has passed, but destruction is all around. Suddenly, a dark figure grabbed the man by the neck, making a loud crack sound, implying a struggle or pain. The man looked up with a desperate expression, his eyes wide, just before another intense light flash hits. The man stood there, looking stunned, his clothes torn and his face showing confusion after the intense moment. The man stumbled and fell with a heavy thud, then started breathing heavily, letting out shaky laughs. He looked up to the sky with a look of relief or slight disbelief, sweat on his face. The woman rushed over, asking Reynolds what was wrong, clearly worried, while Reynolds seemed to be laughing in disbelief, mentioning that their son wasn't even 3 yet. The woman looked up with a worried expression, thinking that Art was already showing signs of something big. The focus moves up to show a very small, young child sitting calmly amidst the wooden wreckage, seemingly unaffected. The scene shows the little boy sitting in a cross-legged meditative posture surrounded by the broken wood from what must have been their house. The woman gently put her hands on the man's back, supporting him after the ordeal. The little boy, Art, stood up lightly and thought to himself, "Wow, I feel great." He clenched his small fist and realized, so this is what it feels like to have a mana core. Art then spread his arms wide, feeling the world around him, and exclaimed, "Even the trees look greener." The young boy happily wondered about the trees, while the background showed close-ups of the destroyed wooden structure. Suddenly, the boy paused, realizing something was off as he looked down at the massive destruction around him. He started questioning what happened, asking, "What the hell?" and then wondered aloud if they were attacked, even calling out, "Who dares destroy the home of a king?" The chapter title card for the beginning after the end appears, along with the credits for the story, artist, and colorist. The story jumps forward in time, showing the young Art resting on his bed, and then a text box explains that a lot has happened in the past year besides rebuilding their house. It is explained that along with his mother teaching him to read and write, he has also been learning the basics of manipulation and augmentation. Since his body was too small for sparring at first, they did basic body workouts, which is shown by his father running powerfully. Art followed his father, but soon his father stopped and tended to the exhausted little boy on the ground. The narration continues that not too long ago, his father finally thought he was ready to practice with a wooden sword he got for his 3rd birthday. A glowing wooden sword is shown, suggesting the start of real training. Art is then seen lying down, focused intently on a book, trying to study. His father burst in, full of energy, telling him it was time to train and that he had the sword ready. Art, interrupted, seemed to hide his face under a piece of paper, indicating he didn't want to stop studying. Outside, his father reminded him of what he was taught, holding a simple stick as a practice weapon. The father instructed Art to match the mana flow with his breathing, saying the core is just another organ, but Art internally doubted if most 4-year-olds could grasp such abstract ideas. Art then focused, holding his small wooden sword, while his father watched with encouragement. The little boy glared with intense focus and swung his wooden sword with surprising speed. The stick hit the father with 2 distinct sounds, a thwack and then a solid thump as the connection was made. The father was repeatedly hit by Art's swings, with whack sounds emphasizing the rapid, unexpected strikes. Art kept swinging, and his father encouraged him, saying he thought he could do it. Art gritted his teeth, thinking he wouldn't get any rest until he finished this training, and he also only had a little time before dinner to study. The small boy took a determined stance, gripping his wooden sword tightly, ready for the next move. The focus zooms in on Art's determined eyes, followed by a calmer look from his father. Art swung again with a shout, and the resulting impact was powerful, making a smash sound as it connected with his father. The force of the blow sent the father reeling back slightly, with a tee-woo sound effect. The father managed to block the next move with the stick, making a thud as it hit the ground near Art. Art, slightly annoyed but determined, asked his father if he could go study now, to which his father reluctantly agreed. The scene shifts to a quiet room with bright sunlight coming through a window. Art sat meditating on his bed, and the narration explained that in this world, strength is judged by the color of one's mana core. An illustration shows a generic body with a black core in the chest, explaining that the mana core starts black because of blood and impurities mixing with mana particles. It is explained that the core gets purer as impurities are filtered out over time, showing a blurry reddish core, and starting the list with black. The core evolution sequence is shown: red, orange, yellow, and silver. Finally, the purest level, white, is shown, and the text states that each stage is divided into 3 shades: dark, solid, and light. Another figure is shown with a bright, pure core glowing in the chest, representing the ultimate power. The narrator concludes that the lighter the mana core, the purer and more powerful it is, just as Art gets an idea and shouts "I" at her tilde in frustration. Art gets upset when someone calls him for dinner, muttering curses as he doesn't want to stop his practice or study. The scene moves to the dinner table, showing a plate with some vegetables and meat, and a glass of water. The mother is shown trying to eat, making clicking sounds with her spoon and glass, looking a bit stressed. Art internally complains that he can't get any alone time because he needs to learn, asking how else he is supposed to learn. Art struggles with his fork and spoon against the food, still making loud clink sounds, while someone calls out honey. The father, looking serious after the dinner sounds, states that he thinks it's time they get Art a proper mentor. Arthur's mother was quite shocked, shouting that Arthur was only 4 years old. She argued with Reynolds, reminding him that he promised to teach their son, and even pointed out some strange carrot-like figures yelling. The intensity of the argument was high, with a bright golden light showing the power involved in the disagreement. Reynolds, looking determined, shouted that this was exactly what he meant, suggesting the situation needed action. Meanwhile, some small green creatures with swords and helmets seemed to be defeated by a much larger, armored figure. Reynolds' companion then explained that he never thought his 4-year-old son would be such a natural at mana manipulation, feeling like he was holding the boy back because of his huge potential. A massive golden explosion happened, clearing the air and showing the impact of the recent events. The woman looked up, seemingly shielded by the light, while many small figures ran away from the powerful blast. She then declared firmly that she would not let her child leave home to go to a city hundreds of miles away. Over dinner, Reynolds insisted that Xyrus was not just any city and promised his friend would take good care of their son, while young Arthur sighed, clearly finding the adult talk tiring. The parents continued to argue, with confused scribbles coming from their speech bubbles, before a loud thump showed someone hitting the table in frustration. Both parents looked at each other with serious, worried faces in the dark, nighttime setting. Reynolds then looked directly at Arthur, asking if he wanted to go to a big city to have a real teacher, giving him a say in the decision. Arthur was surprised that he, a 4-year-old, was being asked to decide something so big, thinking it was too much for his age. After swallowing hard, Arthur asked if his mommy and daddy could come too, so they could all meet the teacher together. The parents looked at each other, clearly having not considered taking everyone along. Arthur started worrying if he had said something wrong or if his question was too complicated for them to understand. His parents then laughed, admitting they hadn't thought about all of them traveling together, and his mother suggested she would feel better if she was there when Arthur was tested and met his teacher. With that, the mother happily declared that it looked like they were all going to Xyrus City. Right after that decision, Reynolds slammed his hands down on the table in excitement, breaking things, while Arthur narrated that he was shocked to hear them preparing for the 3-week journey immediately. The story breaks here for the chapter title card, showing the beginning after the end against a starry blue background. Later, as Arthur was tucked in, he thought he saw some important information written somewhere in a book he was looking at. His mother came in telling him he needed to go to bed because they were leaving early the next day, while Arthur looked tired holding his book. Arthur was shocked at how soon they were leaving, but his mother explained that his dad's old friends from the Twin Horns group were taking them to Xyrus. His mom explained that his dad was already with them, and they were taking the family along, which made Arthur look up curiously. The mother confirmed that the Twin Horns were taking them and gave Arthur a gentle kiss goodnight, explaining his dad was already with the group. She warned Arthur not to stay up reading again but said he could bring books for the trip, before telling him to go to sleep. Arthur agreed and wished his mom good night, receiving a sweet dreams, honey. In return, Arthur reflected in the dark, starry view, knowing that the Twin Horns had been around the area for some time. He remembered they had even helped rebuild their home when they had a chance. Arthur recalled hearing that this travel party had 2 conjurers and 3 augmenters in it. He felt that having them around would help with any trouble they might run into on the way, feeling excited to finally be moving on from his small, quiet town. He was ready to see what this big world truly had to show him. The scene shifts to a bright, clear morning with rolling green hills under a vast blue sky. Arthur walked with his parents, heading out of their village nestled in the lush green mountains. The sun was bright as they left the immediate area, with someone reaching out from the front of the group. Arthur thanked the person leading the way for taking them on the trip to Xyrus. His father then called out to the group, telling everyone he wanted them to meet his son. Arthur's father told him to introduce himself, and Arthur politely said hello and stated his name, thanking them for bringing them to Xyrus. One person commented on how polite Arthur was, while another person seemed interested in his family connection. A quick flash showed a sharp knife, hinting at the nature of the people they were meeting. A red-haired man, identified as Adam Crench, an augmenter specializing in spears, asked Arthur if Reynolds was really his father. As Adam passed by, Arthur was startled by a sudden swoosh as someone grabbed him. A blonde woman named Angela Rose, a wind magic conjurer, squeezed Arthur tightly, saying he was too precious and that he thankfully looked more like his mother. Arthur couldn't breathe from the tight squeeze and felt his heart thumping hard, while his mother covered her face in embarrassment. Arthur's real mother cried out for Angela to stop because she was hurting him, making Angela look shocked. Durden Walker, an earth magic conjurer, then lifted the tiny Arthur up, holding him gently, while Angela looked on. Durden crouched down and patted Arthur gently, making comforting pat-pat sounds. Arthur smiled happily as Durden gave him an affectionate look, even with a dog's happy presence in the background. Arthur then looked towards another member of the group, Jasmine Flamesworth, an augmenter with dual daggers. Jasmine seemed to be standing above, possibly on something tall, and she gave a small nod to Arthur from a distance. As Jasmine moved towards a waiting carriage, someone told Arthur not to mind her, saying she just needed time to get used to him. Another woman extended her hand to Arthur, introducing herself as Helen Shard, an augmenter specializing in magic archery. Arthur happily took Helen's hand, greeting her politely. The man who seemed to be the leader excitedly announced that now that everyone had met, it was time to get ready to move on. He asked if everyone was ready for the journey to begin. Arthur's mother and sister leaned out of the carriage, confirming they were all good. With a command to "Let's go!" the group started moving, with lizard-like creatures pulling the wooden wagons. The creatures started their trot pulling the heavy load. Arthur leaned out of a window on the carriage, looking out with a happy, eager expression. The view ahead showed a vast landscape of mountains and valleys, signaling the start of their long trip. The chapter ends with a big declaration: "Let the journey begin." The sun sets beautifully, painting the sky with bright colors as the travel wagons rest for the night. Later that night, a fierce battle seems to be happening under the starry sky, with people fighting against wolf-like creatures. This intense fight concludes, and the group gathers around a campfire after their journey. A woman is seen roasting food over the fire, while Arthur, looking small, watches the scene. Everyone settles down by the fire, taking a rest from their travels. Arthur looks thoughtful, resting his chin on his hand, as a dark-haired woman asks him how he is holding up and if he is tired. Arthur quietly nods, still looking pensive, as the woman continues to eat her food. The woman tells him not to worry because it is his first time traveling like this, and Arthur meekly agrees. She then asks if his father has been bragging about him being a genius mage and if he really awakened his powers only a year ago, before telling him to sit. A man with red hair stands up and tells Reynolds that he needs to stretch a bit before sleeping. This man then asks Reynolds if it is okay if he spars a little with Arthur, which Arthur immediately rejects by telling him to stretch by himself. Reynolds agrees to let them spar but warns the redhead to be careful, mentioning they just started sparring with light strength and mana exercises. The redhead picks up little Arthur, who seems unhappy despite Reynolds' concern about Arthur's training level. Reynolds and his wife look on with concern as the redhead carries Arthur away into the dark forest area. Arthur thinks to himself that normal kids his age would struggle with just climbing stairs, but here, fighting seems normal for him. The redhead grins widely and asks Arthur if he is ready for their session. Arthur holds his wooden sword ready, making whooshing sounds as he prepares for a swing. The redhead brings his own weapon down and asks Arthur if he knows how to reinforce his weapon, as he is about to strike. The redhead swings his weapon hard, and Arthur seems ready to face the incoming attack. Suddenly, a huge, roaring tiger appears to confront the redhead, filling the screen with its massive face. The redhead just laughs confidently, unaffected by the sudden appearance of the tiger. Back at the camp, Arthur feels a strong connection with his father, who seems to be sensing the fight, making Arthur cringe. Arthur's father yells, telling someone to go get him, while Arthur feels helpless in his small body. Arthur mutters that it is useless, but then closes his eyes, deciding to face the challenge with a look of determination. A golden light shines brightly from a sword held up, illuminating a figure wearing a crown or helmet. Arthur, holding his small wooden sword, stands firmly against the imposing, armored figure holding the glowing sword above him. The armored figure grabs Arthur's hand, and Arthur is shown in silhouette, gathering his strength with his sword. A moment of intense speed is shown as Arthur dashes forward into the darkness. Arthur charges with a determined expression, moving quickly across the terrain. The redhead stands ready, holding his staff, with a knowing look on his face. Arthur dashes right toward the redhead's armored leg with his wooden sword. The redhead watches intently, prepared for the engagement. The redhead yells defend and blocks Arthur's wooden sword swing with his staff, creating a clash. With a quick move, the redhead manages to parry Arthur's attack. Arthur disappears in a poof of smoke right after his move, still holding his glowing sword. Close-up on the redhead's hand gripping his staff tightly. The redhead slips while moving, cursing his mistake. Arthur, looking angry, thinks about how frustrating his current weak body is. The redhead looks slightly surprised by Arthur's unexpected move. Arthur's wooden sword glows brightly as he prepares for another attack. Arthur swings his glowing sword with all his might. Arthur manages a slash attack, but the redhead counters it with his swift movement. Arthur barely dodges a counterattack from the redhead. Arthur is sent flying by a heavy blow that connects with him. The redhead's close-up shows his intense focus as Arthur is momentarily stunned. Arthur swings his weapon in a last-ditch effort. Arthur successfully dodges a powerful kick from the redhead. Arthur looks up, catching his breath, while the redhead regains his stance, ready to continue. The redhead stands over Arthur, staff ready, as Arthur is still on the ground. A visual representation of the staff being stabilized after the exchange. A massive impact, a whack, shows Arthur being hit by the staff in a circular burst of energy. The narrator recalls Newton's third law of motion at that moment. The law states, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This reaction is visualized as a powerful downward force hitting the ground where Arthur is. The impact of the force is shown with streams of energy radiating outwards from the contact point. Arthur is sent flying upwards, landing hard on the ground with a thump. His mother cries out in alarm for Art, noting how much that opposite reaction must have hurt. Arthur is shown lying on the ground, clearly hurt from the force of the impact. Arthur is still in pain, while the redhead is slapped by a bearded man who calls him an idiot for hitting too hard. The bearded man tells the redhead that he never taught Arthur to fight, questioning what kind of hellish training made him such a monster. Arthur's father laughs and asks if that fighting style is what Arthur has been studying. Arthur sheepishly confirms that he learned it by watching his dad and reading books, which makes the redhead question the source of his knowledge. The redhead, despite the reprimand, tells Arthur that he still needs to teach him some of his movement techniques, to which the others nod in agreement. The redhead begins to explain the technique, describing the footwork needed for the move. He continues explaining the motion, which involves crossing the back leg over the front leg and kicking off with mana while almost falling, and Arthur seems to understand excitedly, causing the others to fall over in simple cartoon style. Arthur proudly claims he is almost there, kind of, but then the redhead fails the demonstration by crashing into a tree with a thump. Arthur looks at the downed redhead with surprise and asks how, while the redhead gives a thumbs up from behind the tree. A few days went by since the group started their trip towards Cyrus City. During this time, the main character's birthday also passed. He received a gift and some lessons for his birthday. There was a moment of fun training where someone splashed into the water, making a big splash. Two of the older companions seemed happy watching the activity. The training continued, and it was mentioned that Adam, Helen, and his father were making good progress. One person seemed to be forcefully pushed or thrown into the water during the training session. The splash was huge as someone landed right on top of the main character in the water. Surprisingly, Jasmine was picking up the new techniques very fast, which amazed the main character. The practice continued with rapid movements, and the young boy watched this fast action. The journey resumed, and the group was seen with their wagons, with Jasmine and Helen resting near them. His mother called out to Art, telling him it was time to leave now. The boy quickly replied that he was coming, as they looked towards the open sky and mountains. The scene showed their two wagons moving along a rough path, followed by a title card for the chapter. The wagons continued their slow journey over the rocky terrain, and then a close-up showed a large, clawed foot stepping onto the ground, making a cracking sound. One of the warriors started reminiscing about how the main character's father used to get them into trouble. Another person chimed in, mentioning that the boy wasn't the only one causing trouble, recalling an incident where he accidentally set something off. When asked what that incident was, the first warrior quickly brushed it off, saying it was just a little rodent. The main character checked on his mother, asking if she was okay, and she reassured him she was just a little tired. While his mother rested, the young boy held a book and looked around, noticing some strange papers nearby. He settled down to read his book seriously, focusing hard on the material. The boy looked increasingly stressed and worried while studying the book. Suddenly, a menacing purple aura appeared with intense eyes, demanding, "Teach me mu or tilde," from a small opening in the wood. The boy looked startled, then focused back on the difficult writings in his book. The boy started shaking violently, clearly scared by something, and asking what was happening. His mother and Helen looked worried, and then someone shouted that there were bandits. In response to the threat, one of the warriors commanded everyone to prepare to fight, while the blonde woman used her magic to command the wind and gather protection. His mother quickly shielded the young boy, pressing them both against the wooden wall for cover. Arrows started flying toward them from the attackers. A powerful blast of swirling energy erupted from the ground, repelling the incoming projectiles. The child peered out, still being protected by his mother. Jasmine, using her speed, easily dodged or intercepted attacks near the wagons. A man wearing armor cracked a wooden beam with his hand, showing his strength while surrounded by the dark energy. Another armored man was holding a spear firmly, and a red-haired warrior prepared his own large spear for combat. A small drop of blood appeared where an arrow struck, and then Jasmine was shown calmly removing an arrow from her leg. Jasmine was surrounded by arrows, some stuck in her body, but she still held her bow steady, showing immense resilience. Jasmine then made a swift jump, landing softly on the ground despite the ongoing attack. She then aimed her bow with fierce, glowing eyes, ready to retaliate. Peeking over the barrier, the child and his mother looked terrified as someone declared, "Damn it." Looking up, they realized they were completely surrounded by figures atop the ridge. Arrows were seen hitting the cover of their wagons, while outside, other members of their party drew their bows against the surrounding enemy archers. The bandits were revealed, hiding in the grass with sinister, greedy smiles. A close-up showed a huge axe and the muscular chest of what looked like the bandit leader, wearing a necklace. With a loud thump, a massive axe was thrown and buried itself into the earth, right where someone was standing, followed by the leader saying, "They made a pretty good catch, boys." The leader showed a wide, cruel smile, then gave a chilling instruction to leave only the women and the kid alive and not to leave any scars on them. The focus was on the muscular bandit leader, showing off his scarred chest and green pendant necklace. The reason for keeping them unharmed was made clear: damaged goods would only sell for less money. A thought crosses someone's mind that they have been living in a sheltered world for too long. The surrounding darkness hints at a harsh reality beginning to break through. A man with a terrifying grin and a wild expression loomed large, his jagged teeth showing in a disturbing smile. His eyes were wide with intense, unsettling glee as he looked down. A group of rugged-looking men, one clearly the leader with a muscular build and wild adornments, stand ready for a fight. The leader firmly grasps his weapon, telling his companions to gather and guard while making a grim promise to train someone well. Someone realized that every world seems to have its share of bad people. A sense of damage was felt in the darkness. The captor then declared he would train the baby so well that it would beg to stay with him in the end. A different voice cried out, urging the mother to hurry and heal the father, as there was something wrong with her. The father shouts to gather and guard, while an attacker promises to train the baby so well that they will beg to stay. The father then notices that he is at a disadvantage against multiple opponents. Someone was grasping an object, and a young boy looked up with a fierce and determined expression. He gripped something tightly in his hand while his mother urged him to listen carefully. The woman, with wide, worried eyes, seemed to be in shock or deep distress. A clear plea was directed towards someone to hurry and heal the mother. The man told Arthur to gather and guard while he dealt with the remaining opponents. He promised Arthur that after the mother healed, she could fend off the leader, but he worried about protecting them both. The enemy shouted for everyone to gather and guard against the disadvantage they face. Someone threatened the mother, saying they would train the baby so well the baby would want to stay with them. A young boy with wide blue eyes peered out from behind something while a man with blonde hair and a mask prepared to shoot an arrow. The man shouted a command to gather and guard, then promised to train the boy well. An archer let loose an arrow that flew with great speed toward its target. A voice shouted to gather and guard as a loud rumble echoed around them. The sound of rumbling filled the air as someone was aggressively training another person to fight. The one being trained was warned to stop struggling, as the trainer promised to make them beg to stay later. The fight continued with loud cracks as a figure struck down, sending dust and debris flying. Another man tried to defend himself with a glowing staff, but was clearly struggling against the powerful attacks. The earth wall rose up dramatically, showing many figures scrambling along its steep sides. Below the massive structure, the ground dropped off into a dark void, emphasizing the great height. The rumble of objects flying between the tall cliffs shook the very air. The father gathered his family, urging them to prepare for danger. The father shouts at his son, Arthur, to gather and guard while menacing figures approach them. He urgently tells Arthur to take his mother down the trail to safety after she heals, as he has to fight the leader alone. A fierce woman with long blonde hair strikes out with a sharp object while another woman watches in fear from behind. Below, two masked men, one holding a knife, prepare for a confrontation. A very strong man with a fur collar and an axe roared as he charged toward the fight. He threatened to make someone stay with him through intense training. The archer takes a position high up and lets an arrow fly. A large man with powerful arms manages to block the incoming attack with a sharp move. The man in black forcefully kicked one of the attackers, sending him crashing down onto the rocky ground with a loud impact. Another enemy, holding a bow, looked on with wide eyes at the sudden turn of events. The captor threatened the child with harsh training if the family did not comply. The child's father insisted that the mother and the baby leave immediately after she used her healing spell. The attackers continued their assault, their blades striking with force against the ground. One fighter was slammed down hard, hitting the cracked earth with a loud smack. One enemy prepared to strike down with a curved sword while the other man fought hard to hold another downed person beneath him. The first man yelled to stop struggling, promising to train the baby so well that they would want to stay. The father urged the boy to gather and guard while shouting at someone to stop struggling. He promised to train the struggling person so well that they would beg to stay in the end. The attacker was hit with a sharp object that pierced deeply into his side. The man gritted his teeth, clearly in pain from the wound he just sustained. A woman with dark hair, clearly ready for a fight, nodded firmly as she prepared her next move. She was determined to hold her ground against any threat that came her way. The fight continued near the overturned carts, with a woman fighting some lizard-like creatures and other attackers. In a swift movement, the young woman landed a brutal slash across an enemy's face. With a powerful slash, the fighter moved quickly between the attackers. Blood splattered as the enemies were struck down by the swift attack. The fight intensified as the muscular man slammed down, creating a massive impact on the rocky ground. The red-haired figure struggled beneath the powerful crushing force. Someone took a fast step forward, showing determination in their eyes while gripping a sharp weapon. The person with red hair lunged ahead, ready to strike with great force. The fighter was struck multiple times with sharp objects, causing blood to spray out from the wounds. These swift attacks were delivered with great force, indicating a desperate struggle. The man with red hair and an eye patch seemed strained as he gripped something tightly above him. Down below, a figure dressed in black lunged forward while holding curved blades. The attackers moved in, one delivering a slash while another tried to stab the struggling man. The woman with the dark hair and horns seemed to have been stabbed, blood spraying from her head. A dark eye with a red pupil glares intensely. Elsewhere, a man with blonde hair and exaggerated features wields a glowing whip towards another person who is clearly terrified. The fight was intense as one man's whip cracked out, knocking another man back with a heavy impact. A dark figure was also seen flying through the air, separated from their boots by the force of the sudden attack. The villain aggressively tells the struggling captive to stop resisting, promising to train them so well they will want to stay in the end. The man demanded that the child stop struggling, promising to train them well enough that they would eventually want to stay with him. He mentioned a disadvantage against their opponents and declared that a change was coming. The man gathers himself and unleashes a powerful attack, with loud sounds indicating rapid whips striking near his opponents who are trying to dodge. He then aggressively demands that his family gather and guard, asserting his control over the situation. The man, bleeding slightly near his eye, gritted his teeth with a fierce expression while his enemies tried to surround him. He used his whip-like weapon to swiftly dodge and strike at the shadowy figures attacking him. The fighter realized that the woman was at a disadvantage because of the opponent's longer reach. The narrator wondered if being a fighter alone would be enough to change things. The young boy worried about whether he could win against a grown-up augmenter with his current small body. Suddenly, there was a loud crash as something impactful happened below. A huge attack smashed through the wooden structure, sending debris flying everywhere. The mother, clutching her young child, was thrown violently backwards from the impact. The man struggled as he was held close, and an unseen opponent threatened them, demanding they gather and guard. He fiercely told the person to stop struggling, promising intense training that would make them want to stay. Blood poured from the man's mouth, showing his severe injury. His wife cried out in alarm for her honey as their young son looked on with worry. A man loudly declared he would train the baby so well that the child would beg to stay with him in the end. This was happening while another person warned that they were at a disadvantage against the opponents. The enemy gathered his strength, ready to attack again. He warned the boy that he would train him until he begged to stay. The young man urgently told his mother to quickly heal their father, who was bleeding. The mother looked distressed and worried while the father was being held up. The young woman cried out that there was something wrong with her mother, but she hesitated when told she had to leave. The child worriedly asked why the mother was not healing the father. The mother quickly reassured the child that she was fine and her injuries were not life-threatening. The man, looking menacing with blood on his mouth, told the crying woman not to worry and to do her best. The father tells Arthur to listen carefully to what he is about to say next. He explains that after the mother heals, the bad men will go after her, but he can handle their leader if he does not have to worry about protecting the two children. The father insisted that his son take his mother back down the trail and not stop once the healing spell was finished. The boy protested loudly, refusing to leave his father and insisting he could still fight. The injured man told Arthur to gather and guard, threatening to train the baby so well that the child would want to stay. Arthur, seeing his father injured, urged his mother to hurry and heal him immediately. The figure in black gently tapped the person with brown hair. It looked like some kind of glowing light floated around them in the dark space. The father looked down at Arthur Lewin and told him to listen carefully. He said he knew Arthur could fight, which is why he was trusting him to protect his mother. A drop of blood trickled from someone's mouth in the darkness, with a quiet thought of an appearing. The man sternly told Arthur to protect the baby inside the woman. The scene starts with a moment of rest after some excitement, where a man holds a laughing woman close, while a child sits nearby. The woman, looking tired, reassures someone that she will be fine soon. A serious thought comes up. The boy recalls that his mother was pregnant at that time. The boy remembers that he was planning to tell someone named Cyrus about the pregnancy, but something interrupted. A fighter with an injury around his mouth is shown close up. Then hands are shown grabbing something. The determined young boy looks up and firmly states that he will protect his mom. He seals his promise with a simple, yet serious, "I promise." The chapter title card appears, showing a sword over a broken crown, marking the story's progression. The scene shifts to a younger version of the boy, who tells someone named Art to get ready. The boy's parents are seen with their companions, and a man observes that the enemy side has 4 mages ready. The enemy leader shouts in anger and then commands his men not to let the mother escape, pointing out they also have a healer. The mother and child are being urged to run away quickly by the father figure. The young boy worries about his father, pleading with him not to die, while someone urges them to hurry. A fierce-looking red-haired warrior prepares for a fight, while in the background, the family is trying to escape. An attacker dashes toward the mother and child with sharp weapons, making the mother look worried. The father figure intercepts the attacker, holding him down while telling the others to get away. The mother and child manage to climb up the rocky terrain, escaping the immediate danger zone. A masked enemy holds a weapon close, while below, the child's focused blue eye is shown in reaction. The child's intense gaze shows he is ready for action, just as a massive force is unleashed. A powerful impact happens as the child's body takes a hit while protecting the mother. The child grits his teeth in pain from the impact, causing small cracks around him. The child's weapon breaks with a loud crack, showing the severity of the blow. The masked attacker is surprised by the child's resilience and asks how that was possible. An arrow snaps as it hits something, and the female warrior tells Arthur not to stop. The mother looks on in shock and concern as the fight continues around them. A thought flashes through someone's mind. Something is definitely wrong with the situation. The enemy group is gathered, and someone notes that they expected 4 mages, but the count seems off. An enemy jumps down toward the mother, but Arthur quickly intervenes, blocking the attack. Another enemy attacks, but this time, the father figure is hit hard by an axe swing. With 3 enemies dealt with, someone demands to know where the last one is. The angry enemy leader screams to forget the original plan and orders that no one should be left alive. The young Arthur looks up, wondering who the leader was talking to, sensing another threat. A swirling mass of blue mana begins to form in the air, creating a distinct rumble. Arthur sees the developing magic and reacts with a sharp shit. The blue mana swirls into a massive ball on top of the cliff, with the remaining enemies caught near it. Arthur is shown bracing himself while holding onto something close. A huge wave of blue energy blasts outward with a massive shoom. The mother and child are running away from the blast, but Arthur realizes that even if he dodges with mana, his mom won't be fast enough. Arthur tries to use his speed, gritting his teeth in frustration and shouting, "Damn it." Arthur quickly turns, pushing his mother away, and apologizes internally for the bruises he might cause her. Arthur uses his body to push his mother out of the path of the massive magical attack, while she screams in terror. Arthur is pulled into the magical blast, thinking that if he couldn't escape himself, he would at least take the mage down with him. With all his might, Arthur throws himself and whatever he grabbed into the attack. The attack impacts with a loud splash. As the water subsides, one of the enemies is stabbed by a thrown dagger with a cry of pain. Arthur is shown being pulled upwards by a mana string, while the enemy who is stabbed falls away. Arthur hopes that the mana string he created will hold, as he is suspended over the battle below. Arthur's hand grips something tightly, feeling the strain as he pulls himself up. A powerful surge of energy, possibly lightning, hits the ground near Arthur as he struggles to hold on. An enemy mage reaches out desperately to grab the edge of the cliff, but their grip fails with a crack. The mage tumbles down the cliff face, seemingly defeated. Another combatant raises a large weapon, ready to strike down. A massive, fist-shaped rock formation slams down into the ground where the battle was taking place, leaving Arthur standing near its base. Arthur, suspended by the mana string, is seen falling toward the ground, still attached to something above. The young boy, slightly bruised but alive, looks up with a small, gentle smile. He thinks to himself that it looks like everyone else will be okay, letting out a small sob. In the darkness, Arthur reflects sadly that he always wanted to be in the morning light. Softly entered a grand, elegant room, signaling the start of a new day in a luxurious palace. Someone important made their way down a wide staircase, their footsteps echoing softly in the quiet hall. As the person walked, a maid quickly hurried to get out of the way, making a surprised sound as she moved. The maid stood respectfully, holding a tray, as the important person approached from a lower level. The maid then greeted the man, calling him good morning, King Gray, as he stood formally at the bottom of the grand staircase. King Gray stood in the large, ornate room, looking out toward the open door as if waiting for someone. Suddenly, an old man with a long beard, Marlorn, greeted King Gray, asking if he was the king. Marlorn, an important council member, watched as King Gray looked at the portraits lining the walls. These portraits showed the council members, who were the real rulers managing the country's politics and money. In this world, big wars were replaced by duels between kings, and King Gray was one of the strongest and most famous duel winners. Marlorn admitted that while being on the council was good, he still felt a bit jealous of the fame and glory kings like Gray received after winning. Then Marlorn asked King Gray the reason for his unexpected visit, wondering what brought him there today. King Gray, holding a medal, explained that he was retiring, which seemed to surprise Marlorn. King Gray then stated again to Marlorn that he was officially retiring from his position. Marlorn was shocked and quickly called out to King Gray, asking him to wait and not leave. But King Gray just turned away, his mind filled with memories of his past life as a king. He thought about how he spent his whole life trying to be the strongest, and then wondered what was the point of it all. Was it for fame or glory? He realized none of that mattered to him anymore. He was still an orphan, and everyone he had ever cared about was gone from his life. He would give up everything from that life just to go back and see his cherished friends around a warm campfire one last time. This was the end of his old story, but also the beginning after the end for him. Suddenly, a new sky appeared, showing a beautiful sunset over a thick forest, as if starting a whole new chapter. A young boy lay on the ground, confused, wondering where he was and if he was even still alive after what happened. He saw a dark pool of blood and realized something bad had happened here, feeling a sudden surge of worry. Next to him, there was a dead body covered in blood, showing how dangerous and harsh his new surroundings were. The sight of the dead body made him feel incredibly sick, and he threw up from the shock and disgust. He was a small baby lying helplessly on the ground with a green face, still feeling very unwell. His eyes closed for a moment, and everything went dark, but then he slowly started to wake up again. He opened his eyes and noticed a small, juicy fruit nearby. He sniffed it, feeling his hunger grow stronger. The little boy, still very weak, stared at the fruit and the small bag lying close by. He pushed himself forward, crawling slowly toward the fruit, desperate for something to eat. With great effort, he managed to pick up the fruit, knowing he needed to eat something quickly. He eagerly ate the fruit, chewing and swallowing it quickly, trying to satisfy his hunger. After eating, he felt a bit better and drifted off to sleep, collapsing gently onto the ground. In his sleep, he mumbled thanks for the meal, grateful for the simple food he had just eaten. Later, birds chirped happily in the blue sky, indicating that some time had passed since he ate. He woke up again, feeling restless and confused, tossing and turning on the forest floor. He let out a tired sigh, still feeling weak and sore, but tried to compose himself. The baby boy tried to move his small body, but it felt stiff and unresponsive. His weak baby body was hard to control, making it tough for him to even sit up or crawl properly. Despite the struggle and pain, he pushed himself up, trying hard to stand on his own 2 feet. He finally managed to get up, letting out a small grunt, determined to move forward. He noticed a sharp knife stuck in the ground near a large, dark object. With a strong tug, he pulled the knife out of the ground, causing the object to fall over with a thud. Holding the knife, he looked around at the vast forest, still feeling a bit lost and confused. He wondered, did I really survive that? And tried to understand what was happening to him. He also questioned how much time had passed since he last remembered anything, breaking a small branch. Deciding it didn't matter where he was or for how long, he knew he just had to keep moving, so he started walking with a stick. As he walked through the mystical forest with glowing leaves, he heard someone speak to him from the dark. A voice asked him if he was awake, making him turn his head in surprise and confusion. Arthur woke up to see himself on the forest floor, and a strange voice told him he was finally awake. He quickly hid behind a tree, scared of what might be out there after hearing the unknown voice. He peeked out and saw a dead body, which made him wonder if he was also dead, before the voice asked about his health. Arthur was super scared that the dead body might get up, but then he let out a little puff of relief. The voice quickly told him not to worry, saying the dead body wouldn't suddenly wake up, which made Arthur finally sigh. Suddenly, Arthur realized he shouldn't just trust a strange voice, no matter how calm or nice it sounded. He bravely asked who the voice belonged to and if it was the one who saved him earlier. The voice confirmed it had saved him and said he would know its identity once he arrived at its dwelling. Arthur looked confused, asking why the voice was so sure he would even bother trying to find it. The voice replied that it was the only one who could help him get back home, and Arthur's mind immediately focused on home. He thought of his parents, Ray and Alice, and their adventurer friends, the Twin Horns. He remembered his mom was pregnant and worried if they were all safe and sound. He cleared his throat, still thinking about whether everyone had reached safety. He then politely asked the Mr. Voice for directions so he could meet them, and the voice let out a soft chuckle. The voice praised him for being quick, then surprised him by saying his full name, Arthur Lewin, and gently pointed out that calling a lady Mr. was a bit rude. Arthur was totally shocked, wondering how the voice knew his name. The voice simply said it would show him, and suddenly Arthur's eyes glowed with a strange red light. A strange feeling washed over him as he experienced a rush of images and sensations. It felt like he was falling or flying quickly through time and space. He saw flashes of light and colors, like a fast-moving stream of memories. The ground appeared below, radiating a mysterious light. Beams of light shot up from the forest, creating a surreal scene around him. The sensations continued, making him feel like he was moving at incredible speed. A huge rock face appeared, reminding him of the mountain he had fallen from. Slowly, the intense vision began to fade away into a soft white light. The strange vision ended, and Arthur's eyes blinked shut. The voice then told him he should leave right away, saying it would be much safer to travel while it was still daytime. This was just the start of his new journey, as he had woken up in a world totally different from what he remembered. As his body slowly got better and the aches faded by afternoon, he kept thinking about how he was saved. He wondered what kind of magic was used, how the person knew about their fall, and why only he was saved from it. The more he tried to figure it out, the more confused he got, all while his ears twitched subtly. As he climbed, he quietly hoped that his guesses about this magical event were correct. He excitedly spotted some water and quickly started taking off his tattered clothes. With a big splash, he jumped into the cool water. He happily rubbed himself clean in the refreshing water. The voice joked about how carefree he was, making Arthur blush and quickly plopped down in the water to hide himself. The voice added, "Don't worry, there's not much to see," which just made Arthur even more embarrassed. He quickly tried to put his clothes back on, telling himself that a king must always stay calm, even in embarrassing moments. The voice apologized for teasing him, saying his small body was just undeveloped, as Arthur walked away, still a bit red-faced. Arthur munched on a berry, trying to figure out where he was. He thought that because he fell from the east, he should be close to where the elves lived. But as he looked around, he didn't see the thick fog that usually covered the Elshire forest. He walked through the forest feeling less worried as he only saw small, cute animals, not scary beasts. He was surprised not to see any big mana beasts, even though the forest was rich with mana, but he knew he had to keep moving. His mind went to his pregnant mother and how worried she must be, hoping they were all still alive and safe. The day slowly turned into evening as he kept walking. As he reached a dark crevice in the rocks, the voice said it was glad he had made it safely. Arthur awkwardly tried to talk to the voice, asking if it was a good time to meet. The voice quickly explained it wasn't the rocks themselves and told him to look inside a crevice instead. He looked inside the glowing crevice and finally understood, saying, "Ah, I see." He knelt down and prepared to enter the glowing cave where the voice awaited him. He took a deep breath, his thoughts drifting to his mom and dad. With a determined look, he told himself that he would be home very soon. A small child was stuck in a dark cave, holding onto a broken staff. He looked up at a bright blue light, trying to find his way. Everything was dark, and a faint warning echoed in the air. The voice told him, "Watch your step," but it was too late. A piece of rock crumbled under his foot, making a loud cracking sound. The child screamed as he suddenly started falling deeper into the dark, mysterious cave. He kept falling, twisting in the air, before splashing into a glowing blue liquid below. He continued his long, scary fall down, down, down into the unknown depths. He screamed, terrified, as he plummeted through the blue light. Then, with a loud thump, he hit the ground hard. He lay unconscious for a bit, a purple mark on his face. Slowly, he groaned and started to wake up, looking confused. He thought it would have been nice to get a warning about falling so far. He tried to stand, but his legs were weak and he stumbled. He fell again, hitting the hard ground with a painful CRK and thud. He was still hurting from the fall. Suddenly, he looked up, his eyes wide with terror, seeing something huge and scary in front of him. A giant, dark figure, wearing armor with glowing red eyes, sat on a rocky throne, looking down at the tiny, scared child. The child, still on the ground, wondered, "What is that?" The imposing figure spoke in a deep voice, saying, "We finally meet, child." The scary figure then slowly stood up, looking even bigger and more powerful as purple smoke surrounded it. The child watched, frozen with fear, as the giant figure took a step towards him. The figure told the child to close his mouth, or bugs would fly in, which made the scary moment a little funny. The child quickly closed his mouth, still very scared, looking tiny next to the huge figure. He pouted a little, feeling a mix of fear and annoyance at the giant figure's words. The large figure, who was actually a lady, explained that it would take some time to open a dimensional rift big enough to send him home. She then told the worried child that there were special glowing plants nearby that would help nourish him until she could transport him back. The child's face lit up a little as he looked at the colorful, glowing plants around the cave. He shyly thanked the big lady, still a bit unsure of her, but grateful for her help. He picked some of the glowing fruits, thinking they looked okay to eat. Later, as he rested, the child dreamed peacefully of his family, longing to be with them. His dream showed his happy family together, his mom and dad smiling, holding him close. Back in the cave, the lady broke off a different glowing fruit and told him that one tasted better, surprising him. He accepted it, saying, "I see," still a bit nervous around her. The cave was quiet, and the child thought about everything that had happened. The child eventually felt a bit more comfortable and sat near the big lady, who was also resting and eating a fruit. He bravely asked her name, since he knew she was a lady, and she told him, "My name is Sylvia." Now knowing her name, he asked Sylvia if he could ask a few questions, and she agreed, though she warned she might not answer everything. As his fear of Sylvia faded, he started asking all the questions in his mind: where they were, why she was alone, and where she came from. He continued asking how she got her wound and, most importantly, why she saved him. Sylvia explained that this place was a secret, narrow area between the Beast Glades and the forest of Elshar, and she kept everyone away from it. She told him he was the first person to ever enter her domain. The child then happily introduced himself as Art, short for Arthur. Sylvia agreed to call him Art. She then answered his second question, saying she was alone because she had no one left. She added that she had many enemies who desperately wanted something she possessed. Sylvia explained that her last battle with those enemies left her with a bad wound, which glowed red on her arm. As for why she saved him, Sylvia admitted she wasn't entirely sure, saying perhaps it was his courage or maybe she had simply grown lonely. Sylvia then excused herself for the night, needing to heal her wound to work on the dimensional rift tomorrow. Art wished her good night. As the fearsome figure walked away, Art couldn't help but feel a sense of loneliness from her. Suddenly, Sylvia stopped and turned back, remembering something important. She mentioned that her sight couldn't reach where his family had gone, but she quickly reassured him that his family and friends were safe, just in case he was still worried. Art's eyes welled up with tears as he whispered, "They're safe." Tears streamed down his face, but a wide, happy smile spread across his lips, full of relief. With heartfelt gratitude, Art thanked Sylvia. Arthur practiced fighting with a stick, while Sylvia watched him, a dark, powerful figure. Sylvia was busy getting the portal ready, but they spent many hours talking about all sorts of things. Those hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks as they spent almost every moment together. Even though Sylvia never spoke about her own life, Arthur slowly started to understand what kind of mysterious being she truly was. During this time, Arthur also meditated high up on a mountain, trying to control his mana. He focused deeply, with mana glowing around him as he worked hard to understand its flow. Sylvia, despite her scary looks, was actually very kind and patient, even offering Arthur some glowing, special fruits. She asked him if he had eaten yet and mentioned these fruits were very tasty and rare. Arthur held one of the glowing fruits in his hand, feeling Sylvia's gentle and kind nature, which reminded him of his own mother. But just like his mother, Sylvia also firmly corrected him when he was wrong, making him think back to something unpleasant. He remembered a bad feeling, a moment when he was really angry. There was a time when Arthur felt a lot of hatred toward the bandits who had hurt him. He believed those bandits deserved to die awful deaths if any of them had managed to survive. He was so angry and determined, swearing that he would hunt them all down. Suddenly, Sylvia's massive hand smacked Arthur hard, sending him flying through the air. Arthur was completely stunned, left hanging in the air after the unexpected blow from Sylvia. He landed on the ground with a thud, immediately asking Sylvia why she had hit him. Sylvia explained that while the bandits might deserve death, she didn't save the mage he cared about for the same reason. Hate can be dangerous. She warned him that letting his heart be full of hatred and a desire for revenge would only harm himself in the end. Instead, she advised him to live his life proudly, always looking ahead to the future. Sylvia told him he would face more problems, but he should not let sadness or anger ruin his mind. Only by learning from them and facing the future with a smile would he truly win. She then gently asked if her flick had hurt him too much, seeing him still deep in thoughts. Arthur was truly affected by Sylvia's words about life and morals, even though she looked like a creature of evil. She called his name, pulling him out of his thoughts. Sylvia asked him why he wasn't eating the fruit and if something was bothering him. Arthur quickly snapped out of it, smiling and assuring her that he was fine, then took a bite of the fruit. Arthur then noticed Sylvia's wound looked worse, glowing red, but she calmly told him not to worry, saying it was normal and happened sometimes. He questioned if that was really true, then asked Sylvia how he, a young boy, had already formed his mana core, as humans usually do it much later. Sylvia was surprised by how well Arthur could use mana, better than most adult mages, and Arthur proudly said his parents called him a genius. Sylvia then thought that maybe he could learn something even more advanced, and Arthur eagerly asked what it was. Sylvia showed him a powerful skill, explaining that it meant meditating and absorbing mana while moving, and eventually even fighting. Dark energy flowed around her. Arthur watched in amazement, shocked by how Sylvia could walk and keep her mana flowing at the same time. Sylvia explained that humans often think simply about mana, and advised him to start with small, simple movements and then build up from there. Arthur tried to follow her advice, gently moving his hands and attempting to gather mana, but it just wasn't working. He realized it was much harder than it sounded, and Sylvia explained that mana beasts learn this naturally, but humans usually awaken much later in life, making it tough. Sylvia encouraged him, saying that since he awakened so early, if he practiced very hard, he would definitely be able to master the skill. Arthur, full of fierce determination, declared he would do his very best, which made Sylvia give a soft chuckle. Sylvia continued to show him the technique, mana swirling and glowing around her form. Arthur kept practicing, moving clumsily and even tripping, trying to keep his mana steady while moving. He persisted with his training, understanding that the goal was to fight skillfully while always keeping mana flowing steadily inside him, though it was tiring. Arthur gripped his stick firmly, focusing intently as he prepared for his next move. He practiced his moves, swinging his stick and then stabbing with it, repeating the motions. Suddenly, mana began to flow around his hands, shocking Arthur before he excitedly shouted to Sylvia that he finally did it. Just as Arthur celebrated, a loud thud echoed, and he looked over to see Sylvia collapsed on the ground. Sylvia lay there, her body pulsing with a painful red glow, looking very weak and injured. Arthur's face filled with horror. Arthur, filled with fear and worry, cried out Sylvia's name. Art screamed Sylvia's name as he saw her falling down, looking very badly hurt. He wondered what had happened to her. He looked really scared and worried, seeing Sylvia lying in a pool of blood. Art rushed to Sylvia, begging her to hold on, as her leg was bleeding very much. He tried to support her, his face full of panic and despair. Sylvia let out a terrible cry of pain, and then a loud crashing sound filled the air, showing how much she was suffering. Art held her close, seeing her wounds get worse super fast, which made him very sad and confused. Behind them, a bright, colorful portal started opening, glowing with magic. Art's face got serious, as he slowly understood the terrible truth of what was happening. He realized Sylvia's wound was getting worse because she was using her power to create that portal. Flashbacks quickly showed him all the times Sylvia had helped him, and now he saw her sacrificing herself for him. More memories came, reminding him of Sylvia's kindness and care, making the current situation even harder to bear. Art fell to his knees, knowing for sure now that Sylvia's injuries were getting much worse with every passing second. He understood she was making the portal, and her wound was getting worse, all because of him. Big tears rolled down his face as he realized Sylvia was doing all this just for him. Sylvia tried to calm him, saying it's okay, little one, even while holding her badly bleeding chest. Art couldn't understand. He kept asking, how can it be fine? Between his sad hiccups, he cried even harder, knowing Sylvia was dying to make sure he was safe. No narration for the title card. Art cried a lot, more than he usually would, feeling like a true child for the very first time. Sylvia, still in her demon-like form, asked him if he had calmed down, but Art could only say no, still feeling very upset. She gently told him they didn't have much time left, and she didn't want him to blame himself for this. Art still felt he had to blame himself, saying she was basically sacrificing herself so he could go meet his family. Sylvia, however, said he was doing her a favor by letting her leave the cave quicker. Art said her name, Sylvia, as she began to prepare for something big. Sylvia started changing, her dark form cracking and glowing with bright golden light. Golden energy burst around her, making more cracking sounds as her transformation continued. Huge, beautiful white wings appeared, and her hair turned a soft, light color. Art looked up, amazed, as white feathers floated down gently around him. Sylvia was now a majestic white dragon floating above the bright, colorful portal she had created. She asked Art if she looked more like Sylvia now in her true form. Art was completely shocked, realizing that Sylvia, his caretaker, was actually a dragon. Sylvia confirmed she was a dragon, but quickly added that they had no time for chit-chat as she needed her original form to finish the portal. She also warned that they would be coming soon, making Art ask who she meant, as the portal started to shine even brighter. The portal glowed intensely, sending out bright rays of colorful light. Sylvia told Art to listen very carefully as the swirling portal grew more powerful beneath her. She said she had a few important things to tell him before they had to part ways, and then gave him a small, glowing, rainbow-colored egg. Art held the egg. It felt light, but also heavy with some hidden meaning, making him look at it with wide eyes. Sylvia pulled a long, white feather from her own wing. She instructed Art to wrap the egg in that feather to hide its special energy. Art, still confused, asked Sylvia what all this was, but she just affectionately nudged him with her head and said she had one more thing to do. Sylvia then transferred some of her powerful magic into Art, causing bright runes to appear on his body, and he screamed in pain. She explained that this power would show itself when the time was right, as she trembled from the huge effort. Art asked if she was okay, noticing her eyes looked different. She quickly told him to hurry, as the portal would take him near humans, not directly home. He questioned if she was just going to leave him, as the cave walls around them began to crack and rumble loudly. Suddenly, a huge boom echoed, making Art look up nervously at the collapsing cave. Dust and rocks fell everywhere, and a strong wind blew as Sylvia pushed her remaining energy into the portal. Just then, another figure, looking like Sylvia's dark, earlier form, appeared and told Lady Sylvia to give up. The enemy told Sylvia to surrender right now, suggesting that perhaps her wound could even be healed if she complied. Art noticed that this new enemy looked very similar to Sylvia's previous dark form. The enemy angrily accused Sylvia of causing too much trouble already. Sylvia flew away from the enemy, trying to keep the portal safe and open. She confessed to Art that she had actually made the transportation spell last longer on purpose just so she could spend more time with him. Art called out Sylvia and she replied that she wouldn't ask for forgiveness, but had one more selfish request, showing her bleeding wound clearly. She asked him if he could call her grandma just this one time. Art moved closer to her, still holding onto a piece of her feather, looking at her terrible wound. He cried out, "No, no, no! Just come with me!" He also said he didn't know what she did, but everything felt frozen right now. Art wanted them to leave the cave together, but Sylvia's sad eyes showed she knew she couldn't. Sylvia looked at him with deep sadness, and Art started to call out her name one last time as she pulled away. With a final, gentle look, she said, "Farewell, Art." Sylvia then sent Art through the brightly colored portal, and he screamed, "No, Sylvia!" Art was being pulled into the glowing, colorful portal, reaching out desperately for Sylvia. As he disappeared, he managed to shout "Grandma," and Sylvia shed a single tear, touched by his words. Sylvia closed her eyes peacefully, now that she had heard Art call her grandma. She whispered thank you, as the light around her faded, and the portal closed behind Art. With a final thought of "my child," Sylvia disappeared completely, leaving only a shimmering trace of magic in the cave. The whole scene then faded to white, leaving only silence and emptiness behind. Bright, colorful energies swirled around, hinting at a powerful event happening. The vibrant light continued to flash, filling the air with a magical glow. Then, with a loud zap, a burst of energy shot through the sky. Suddenly, the bright lights faded, and a peaceful forest appeared under a soft sunset. A small hand reached up toward the sky, as if someone was waking up or falling. Arthur lay on the forest floor, a tiny figure amidst fallen petals as birds chirped around him. He slowly looked up, his eyes wide, trying to understand where he was. A look of pain crossed his face as he realized something important was missing. He silently thought that Sylvia was truly gone from his side. Arthur squeezed his hand tightly, feeling the deep sadness of loss. The thought hit him hard. He would never get to see Sylvia again. He cried out in sorrow, his emotions overflowing at the painful realization. Above him, birds flew, their cries mixing with Arthur's own heartache. The vast clear sky stretched out, making him feel even smaller and more alone. As time passed, the light of day broke through the clouds in the sky. Arthur lay there, his mind filled with all the memories of the 4 months he spent with Sylvia. He remembered how Sylvia treated him like her own child, teaching him so much that he needed in this new world. Suddenly, he felt a strong thump inside him. Another thump echoed, like a powerful heartbeat resonating through him. Arthur was startled, wondering what that strange feeling was when he heard a voice. He quickly realized it was Sylvia's voice and asked if it was really her. Sylvia's voice confirmed it was her, explaining that she was leaving him a message. She said that if he was hearing this, it meant she had shown him her true form. Arthur had a quick memory of Sylvia as a giant, majestic white dragon, her true form. Sylvia's message continued, saying he was too young and not strong enough yet, even though his mana core had reached the dark red stage, to know the full truth. She told him she had given him a special gift, infusing her unique will into him, and how well he used this gift would decide his future as a mage. Sylvia knew he might be feeling sadness, anger, or even guilt right now, but she reminded him that he had a family to protect and a big purpose to fulfill in this life. She wished for him to enjoy his childhood and grow into a man his parents and she would be proud of, promising he would hear from her again once his mana core reached the white stage. Until then, she said her farewell. Her final words to him were King Grey, a name from his past life. The magical message faded away, leaving Arthur alone once more. Many questions bothered Arthur long after Sylvia's voice was gone. He wondered how long she had known his real identity and how she even found out. One thing became very clear to him: if he only focused on training for revenge, this life would be just like his last one. So, for now, he decided he had to keep moving forward. But first, he needed to figure out exactly where he was. He looked up at the giant trees all around him, trying to get his bearings. Carefully, he moved through the dense forest, making sure to be quiet. He began to climb and jump from tree to tree, using the mana Sylvia taught him. He skillfully leaped between the branches, getting better with each move. He grabbed onto a thick tree trunk, pulling himself up higher. He looked down at the forest floor below, still high up in the trees. Arthur moved smoothly up the tree, making his way through the canopy. He realized he was deep inside the Azure Forest, a vast magical area. He continued to dash quickly from tree to tree, using his enhanced agility. He was happy that with Sylvia's mana rotation technique, he could use his magic for much longer now. But he still couldn't help but wonder how he actually ended up there. Sylvia had mentioned he would arrive near other humans, so he kept looking around. He was getting quite good at traveling through the trees when he suddenly heard a loud "Kai-ah." He was shocked, recognizing its sound as a human scream. He immediately dashed in the direction of the cry. Soon, he spotted something below and knew he had found people. He hoped they could take him with them, but then he paused. He climbed down carefully, noticing something strange about the situation. He got closer to the ground, keeping himself hidden. He took another quick leap, positioning himself to get a better look. He twitched his ear, straining to hear what the people below were saying. He heard a muffled cry, like someone trying to scream, followed by a harsh voice telling them to shut up. A loud smack echoed, making his blood run cold. Arthur's eyes widened in horror, realizing what was happening. He saw a group of rough-looking men, talking about getting ready to leave the forest in just a few days. One of them said that elf girls were worth a lot, especially a child who was still a virgin. The boss ordered him to shut up and put the girl back in the carriage quickly so they could move. Arthur then understood they were slave traders. His face twisted with intense anger and disgust at the evil act. Inside the carriage, an unconscious elf girl lay tied up, confirming Arthur's worst fears. One of the rough men yelled for Deuce to hurry up from behind. Someone then realized they were dealing with a kid mage. A man dropped his weapon, deciding they shouldn't accidentally kill this valuable golden egg. The man, whose hands started to glow, thought the kid mage might bring them even more money than the elf girl they already had. The little boy, Arthur, looked on sadly, then suddenly dashed forward, hoping not to die. Arthur knew he needed a clever plan, even though he just wanted to get home. He prepared his next move while hanging in the air. He was falling through the trees, making a decision on how to proceed. He landed gently on a tree branch, realizing that dealing with these slave traders was the most important thing right now. From his hiding spot in the trees, he quietly watched the men. He knew he couldn't just attack all four of them head-on. That would be too dangerous. So, he moved carefully through the forest, planning his strategy. He kept moving, observing everything around him to find a perfect chance to strike. He decided to follow the slave traders from a distance. He waited patiently for the right moment to make his move. He continued to watch their carriage and the men, biding his time. He sat down to meditate, gathering his strength and focusing his energy. Finally, his eyes glowed with determination, realizing it was time to act. He quickly grabbed a small object from the tree. He threw it expertly, hitting a deer's antler with a quiet tack. The noise startled the hounds, who began barking loudly, causing one trader to angrily demand they be silenced before they woke everyone. Another trader grumbled about the damn mutts, while Arthur secretly prepared, forced to use a special technique from his past life. He focused, condensing Ma into a glowing blue blade, a trick he wasn't sure would even work in this new world. He threw the glowing blade toward the hounds, telling them playfully to chew on each other's antlers if they were bored. The blade hit one of the hounds with a dull thud, and Arthur instantly dashed forward. He swiftly slashed at one of the surprised traders with his mana blade. The trader's arm was cut, and he dropped his weapon in shock. Arthur moved in close, ready for another strike. He plunged his mana blade into the trader, finishing him off quickly. Arthur then calmly picked up the fallen trader's knife, thanking him for the new weapon. As blood dripped onto the ground, the remaining hounds began to sniff the air intently. The hounds smelled the fresh blood, their eyes glowing as they started to drool. Soon, loud crunching and snapping sounds filled the air as the hounds devoured the first fallen trader. A second trader, who was sitting near the fire, wondered why his partner was taking so long to come back. He called out, asking if his partner was taking a bathroom break, but Arthur's shadowy figure appeared behind him. The trader turned around, startled by what he saw. Arthur covered the man's mouth and quickly stabbed him with the knife, ending him with a quick slash. More blood dripped, confirming that the second trader was also dead. Arthur, bruised and tired, realized fighting in this small body was very difficult, but he needed to finish the last two traders while they were still asleep. Suddenly, one of the remaining traders woke up with a loud thud and complained loudly in his sleep-addled state. The awakened trader mumbled angrily, wondering why there was so much noise. He then fully woke up, calling out for Pinky and Deuce, looking for his missing partners. Another bald trader, sensing trouble, quickly dashed toward the commotion. The bald trader tried to hit Arthur, but Arthur skillfully dodged and countered, preparing his mana blade. Arthur slashed with a green mana blade, taking down the third trader and thinking, 3 down. The last trader, a woman, let out a terrified scream. She warned the bald trader, Danton, to be careful because the little boy was a powerful mage. She finally understood that she was facing a kid mage. She decided not to kill the golden egg, dropping her weapon and making a shushing motion with glowing hands, revealing she was a mage too. She thought that Arthur might be worth even more money than the elf girl. Arthur, seeing her prepare, dashed forward, determined not to lose. He smashed into her, disrupting her attempt to cast a spell. She cried out in pain as his attack connected. She was shocked and confused by his unexpected speed and strength. Arthur quickly formed a sharp, glowing blue mana blade. He sliced at her, but she managed to twist away, only getting a glancing blow. She acknowledged his cute tricks with a sly smile. She then lunged forward, throwing her own knife at Arthur and challenging him to catch it. Arthur was surprised by her speed, but he quickly reacted, preparing a kick. He landed a strong kick, sending her flying backward, and she complimented his quick reaction. She hit the ground hard with a loud thud. She slowly got back up, reaching out for Arthur and calling him her bag of gold. She grabbed Arthur's leg, lifting him upside down, and told him to give up because he was just a small kid. As he hung upside down, Arthur thought about how creating a mana blade was similar to wine magic. He then wondered if fire magic would work the same way. He began to condense fire mana in his hand, which was still gripping her arm. The woman's eyes widened as she noticed the intense glowing heat in Arthur's hand. Arthur unleashed a powerful explosion of fire directly onto her, while still hanging upside down. A massive explosion erupted, engulfing the woman in flames. She screamed in agony as the fire magic blasted her. Injured and furious, she clutched her burning arm. She yelled that she didn't care if she had to sell his dead body, swearing he was finished. However, Arthur acted even faster, throwing the knife he had taken earlier, striking her fatally in the neck. Arthur stood amidst the dissipating smoke, the knife still glowing with residual energy in his hand, having defeated all the slave traders. The last trader fell, weakly begging Arthur to stop and show mercy. Arthur stared down at the fallen man, his face bruised but resolute. He remembered that the little elf girl probably begged the same way when she was captured. He then went to the carriage and found the elf girl, still tied up and sobbing softly. He smiled gently, telling her to come out, assuring her that it was safe now. He reached out his hand to her, offering freedom and telling her she could go back home. The scared elf girl looked up at Arthur, still bound, but with a flicker of hope in her eyes as he offered her help. Arthur covered the little elf girl's eyes as rustling sounds filled the air around them. He told her there were things ahead that little kids shouldn't see. He also mentioned that even though she was just a kid, she was still a little bit older, hinting at the difficult situation. Arthur then firmly told her not to remove the cloth covering her eyes until he said it was okay, and urged them to keep moving. The little girl simply replied, "Okay," trusting Arthur to lead her away from danger. As they walked further, Arthur made sure they were a safe distance away from whatever they had left behind. He believed they were now far enough. Finally, Arthur removed the cloth from her eyes, letting her look around at their new, safer surroundings. The boy, Arthur, looked around with a determined expression, checking their new location. The elf girl, Tesha, seemed a little surprised but then looked up at Arthur with relief, muttering a quiet thank you. She held on to Arthur, and he jokingly introduced himself, trying to lighten the mood after their scary escape. Arthur playfully pulled his hand back, trying to tease her a bit, but she quickly grabbed his torn shirt, not wanting him to leave her. Arthur tried to explain that he also needed to get home, reassuring her that the bad guys who took her wouldn't follow them anymore. He then wondered aloud if elves were generally safe in the forest, hoping to calm her fears about their journey. But the girl just stared at him with a worried face, making Arthur realize she was still very scared. She explained that her parents had told her kids could get eaten by dangerous beasts like hounds or tree golems in this forest, which made Arthur understand her fear better. Arthur sighed, realizing she was truly afraid, and asked if she at least knew how long it would take to get to her home from here. She admitted she had no idea. He decided he would go gather some supplies for both of them, telling her to stay put for a moment. Arthur hoped their trip wouldn't be too long as he prepared to search for supplies, and the girl agreed to wait for him. This marks the beginning of their journey in this new chapter. This is the title and credit information for the chapter, showing who created the story and art. Arthur went back to the wrecked carriage and carefully salvaged whatever useful supplies he could find for their journey. He knew neither of them had any idea how long their trip would take, and he also had to think about his own journey back to the human kingdom. Arthur decided they couldn't take the carriage because it would attract too much attention, so walking was their only option. He also made sure to dispose of some of the dangerous creatures they had encountered, leaving blood trails. Arthur put on a thick coat and backpack, hoping that once they reached the elves' home, they would have a way to help him return to the human kingdom. He returned to the little elf girl, bringing back what he had found. Arthur came back to Tesha, who was sitting patiently, and presented her with the new items. He gave her some clothes he found in the carriage and a warm cloak to wear, as it was likely to get cold. She thanked him. Arthur gently patted her head, seeing her happy smile now that she had proper clothes and some comfort. With their preparations complete, Arthur told her it was time to head towards her home. As they started walking in the general direction Tesha pointed, Arthur asked her name. She said her name was Tesha A. Ralith and then asked for his. He told her his name was Arthur Lewin, and then she curiously asked how he ended up in the Elshire forest. Arthur replied that it was a long story, but Tesha cheerfully told him they had plenty of time to hear it. He vaguely explained that he got separated from his family, and Tesha asked if that meant he came from the human kingdom. Arthur confirmed that he did, and Tesha seemed to ponder something seriously. She then asked him if it was true that all male humans were perverts and had more than one wife, looking very curious. Arthur was shocked by the question. He asked who told her that, and she replied it was her grandpa. Arthur then asked if she even knew what pervert meant, and she admitted she didn't really. Arthur clarified that usually, only some nobles among humans preferred to have multiple wives, which seemed to clear things up for Tesha. He then quickly changed the subject, asking her what it was like living in a Manhwa. Tesha excitedly explained she had fun with her caretakers and grandpa since her parents were busy. She also shared her excitement about getting a mentor to train under once she awakened, which made Arthur think about Lenwar's unique education system. Arthur was amused by her innocence, and Tesha looked confused by the word he mumbled to himself. He dismissed her confusion, saying he was just talking to himself, and they continued their journey, making a small campfire to rest. Later, Tesha asked Arthur what happened to the bad guys who had captured her. He gently told her they had run into a rather unfortunate accident. She worried if they would try to find her again, but Arthur promised her that she would never see them anymore. Tesha was visibly relieved and thanked Arthur sincerely for everything he had done for her. As night fell completely, the forest became quiet and a sense of calm settled around them. They found a sheltered spot to make camp, with Arthur sitting by a small fire and Tesha resting nearby. Arthur told Tesha that she should get some sleep, but she immediately asked him about himself, wondering if he wouldn't rest. He told her he would keep guard outside their tent, ensuring her safety while she slept. Under the starry night sky, Arthur sat outside the tent, watching over Tesha. He planned to use this quiet time to understand the will Sylvia had left him, but then he heard some rustling from inside the tent. Tesha peeked out, asking Arthur if he was sure he didn't need some rest too. She then quietly added that her grandpa told her not to share a bed with a boy, but she wouldn't tell on him. Arthur said he wasn't sleepy, and Tesha, looking worried, quietly went back inside the tent, accepting his answer for now. But then Arthur had another idea and, with some rustling, he called her back, explaining that beasts were more likely to come if they noticed a small child like her outside. He then proposed that for their safety, Tesha should actually be the one keeping guard inside the tent. Arthur tried to sound convincing, insisting it was for their safety, definitely not because he was scared to be outside alone. Tesha finally understood and agreed, so Arthur told her to get some sleep. They both settled into the tent for the night. Tesha seemed to drift off to sleep, but Arthur remained awake, watching her carefully. Arthur watched over the sleeping Tesha, a gentle smile on his face, ensuring her peaceful rest throughout the night. As Arthur looked up at the stars from the tent, he quietly wished Tesha Iralith a good rest, acknowledging all the hardships she had faced. They were deep inside a mysterious forest, with tall trees all around and berries on the ground. At night, they made a small camp, with a fire burning gently as a little rabbit creature sniffed nearby. Arthur and Tesha rested for the night, sleeping soundly next to each other. Their journey continued through unfamiliar woods, with only the changing scenery and passing time marking their progress. Arthur looked thoughtful, perhaps worried about his family far away. He kept moving forward, pushing through the dense foliage. Tesha, who had been very scared at first, was now slowly becoming more comfortable. She started to smile more, showing she was getting used to being with Arthur. The path ahead remained long, full of towering trees. They walked on, the forest seeming to stretch endlessly as the sun began to set in the distance. Arthur felt worried about his family and really wanted to go home quickly. Suddenly, a sharp pain hit him, making him clutch his chest while Tesha looked on, concerned. Despite the pains, they continued their difficult walk through the forest. Later, they set up camp and lit a crackling fire for the night. They rested by the campfire, taking a break from their long journey. But then, Arthur felt another jolt of pain, making him grab his chest tightly. He bent over, gritting his teeth, as the intense pain from his mana core struck again without warning. Sweat beaded on his face as he struggled to endure the sudden agony. Tesha quickly asked if he was okay, and Arthur tried to play it cool, saying he was fine. But Tesha could see he was hurting and continued to look at him with worry. Another night passed under the starry sky, bringing them closer to their destination. Even at night, Arthur suffered from the mysterious chest pains which seemed to be getting worse. He tried to hide his discomfort from Tesha, but it was becoming harder to pretend. The next day, Arthur managed to smile for Tesha as they walked, trying to keep her spirits up. Suddenly, they heard growling, and a monstrous wolf creature attacked them from the snowy forest. Arthur quickly reacted, using his powers to defend Tesha from the charging beasts. He protected Tesha, facing the danger with a determined look. Just then, another wave of pain hit him, even stronger and more frequent now, forcing him to clutch his chest again. Arthur thought about telling Tesha, but decided against it, not wanting her to worry more, as she innocently walked ahead. As night fell, they found shelter and settled into their tent. Inside the tent, it was dark and quiet, a moment of peace after a tough day. Arthur and Tesha sat close in the tent, sharing a quiet moment under the night sky. The bright morning sun rose, signaling a new day for their journey. As more days passed, Tesha started to recognize parts of the forest, realizing they were getting closer to home. However, Tesha's body was getting tired from constant travel, so their walking pace had to slow down. Arthur noticed her struggle and kindly offered to carry her heavy bag. Even though Arthur was using his mana to strengthen himself, the pains in his chest kept coming. He kept trying to hide his pain, but it was clear Tesha was getting more worried about him. One morning, Tesha looked shocked for a moment, then saw Arthur giving her a sheepish smile. They seemed to be getting along much better, even falling asleep close to each other. The next day began, and Tesha gently woke Arthur up. Tesha shyly asked Arthur if, since they were good friends now, she could call him Art like his family did. Arthur said he didn't mind, which surprised Tesha, who might have expected a bigger reaction. He then smiled warmly, telling her he would be honored if she, Tesha Iralith, would call a simple country boy like him Art. Tesha teased him, saying he talked like an old man, and Arthur shot back with a playful jab about her being a crybaby. Annoyed but playful, Tesha told him to shut up and playfully covered his mouth. Suddenly, Tesha gasped and pointed, seeing something important in the distance. Arthur, still teasing, pretended not to care and jokingly listed the boring things he saw, like moss and leaves and fog and trees. Despite their playful arguments and mental age difference, they had truly become much closer friends. They often slept close together, a sign of their growing bond and trust. Arthur reached out and touched a nearby tree. Tesha excitedly started tapping the trees, her face lighting up with joy. She turned to Arthur, her eyes sparkling, and announced, "We're here." A bright, green light erupted from the ground, causing Arthur to stare in amazement. The glowing green light grew even stronger, filling the area with a vibrant shimmer. Tesha stood in the middle of the bright green light, looking completely at home and radiant. The mystical green glow spread further, illuminating the forest around them. Arthur and Tesha stood in silhouette against the beautiful, glowing green light. Tesha called out happily to Arthur, asking him to come join her. She extended her hand, inviting him into the magical green light that surrounded her. Arthur lands with a thud after using a teleportation gate, clearly not a fan of the bumpy ride. Someone gently pokes him, and Tesha announces that they have finally arrived at their destination. Arthur and Tesha step out of a bright, glowing portal with tall, silent guards standing by the gate. Arthur's eyes open wide, amazed by the stunning new place they have landed in. They are in a magnificent elven city, built beautifully into a huge natural cavern with many levels and structures. The city looks incredibly grand, with large staircases and sparkling fountains, full of activity. The whole place felt so perfectly clean and untouched, a truly pristine sight. Some important-looking elves are already waiting. Arthur could only think of the word pristine to describe the amazing scene, but even that didn't feel enough. Suddenly, bright light streams from above, catching everyone's attention. More light streaks zoom down from the top, creating a beautiful display in the city. These bright, magical lights weave through the grand architecture of the elven city. The lights finally gather and swirl around the central fountain, creating a magical glow. Arthur and Tesha stand together as the last of the light show fades around them. The magical energy spins and then disappears, marking the end of the teleportation arrival. Tesha grabs Arthur's hand, excited, and pulls him forward through the fading light. Many royal guards are kneeling on the ground, loudly welcoming back their royal princess. Arthur looks completely shocked by the grand and formal welcome Tesha is receiving. Tesha smiles warmly at Arthur, confirming that she is indeed the princess everyone is greeting. This is the title for the chapter, the beginning after the end, showing the story continuing. A guard bows and explains that they came as soon as they saw the royal teleportation gate had been used, and mentions the king and queen are coming. The king, Aldwin Iralith, and the queen, Muriel Iralith, rush out of a fancy carriage, overjoyed to see their daughter, Tesha, safe. They quickly step down from their carriage, eager to reach Tesha. Virian Iralith, the former king of Valenwar and a famous war leader, is also there, watching them. Virian looks down at Arthur and Tesha, his expression kind and welcoming. He gives a gentle, warm smile to the children. Arthur stands a little awkwardly as Tesha leans slightly towards him, happy to be home. The king and queen embrace Tesha tightly, relieved to have her back, while Virian observes the touching reunion. Arthur watches them, wondering if his own mother and father would react with such overwhelming joy when they finally see him. The king thanks Arthur for helping Tesha return safely and invites him to stay in their home as a guest. The king adds that Arthur can rest and then explain what happened, but his sharp eyes make it clear it's not a request, but an order. Arthur bows politely, accepting the invitation and feeling honored. The royal family and their entourage begin to walk toward the castle. Tesha, full of energy, beams at Arthur and gestures for him to come along. She eagerly pulls Arthur, wanting to show him all the amazing things inside. Arthur had expected a grand castle, knowing Tesha was a princess, but he was still surprised by what he saw. Tesha playfully clings to Arthur, who looks a bit overwhelmed by her excitement. They approach a massive, impressive castle built right into the side of a mountain. Inside, the castle is lavish with a grand staircase and many maids lined up to greet them. Arthur feels out of place, wondering if he stumbled into some dramatic novel. The queen tells her maids to take Arthur, wash him up, and prepare a room for him to rest. However, Arthur, despite being a guest, insists that he would like to explain what happened first. He is led to a grand room where they can discuss everything. The king, queen, Virian, and other advisors gather around a large table, ready to listen to Arthur's story. Arthur sits at the head of the long table, a small child facing the powerful royal family. He introduces himself as Arthur Lewin from a humble town in Sapien, trying to sound mature and respectful despite his age. Arthur takes a deep breath, mentally preparing himself for the serious conversation ahead. The king acknowledges Arthur's maturity and education, despite his humble background, and asks him to begin his story. Arthur starts by giving a half-truth, saying he got separated from his family after running into some bandits. As his story moves on to how he met Tesha, the atmosphere in the room suddenly becomes very tense. The king slams his fist on the table, furious to hear about slave traders, and immediately assumes they were humans. Arthur quickly corrects him, explaining that slave trading is a profession, not exclusive to any race, which makes everyone pause. The silence in the room is heavy after Arthur's bold statement. Some guards instinctively reach for their weapons, but Virion raises his hand, signaling them to stop. Virion then questions Arthur, asking if he, as a mere child, tried to negotiate or beg for mercy from the slave traders. Arthur calmly states that he is a mage, despite his young age, and he eliminated the slave traders himself to rescue Tesha. One of the guards, angered by Arthur's claims, draws his glowing sword in disbelief. Virion's expression remains stern, carefully watching the tense situation unfold. Arthur looks at the enraged guard, maintaining his composure. He declares that no matter if they believe him or not, the important thing is that Princess Tesha is safely returned. Arthur states that all he wants now is to go back to his family in the Sapien Kingdom. Arthur looks serious as he states that Princess Tesha is now safely back, whether people believe him or not. All Arthur wants right now is to return to his own family in the Sapien Kingdom. Princess Tesha looks shocked and asks Arthur if he is really going to leave already. The king and queen of the elves listen to Arthur's words with thoughtful expressions. Arthur explains that because of past events, he feels it's not proper for a human like him to stay in the Elven Kingdom for too long. He also makes it clear that his main goal is to make sure his own family is safe. He wants to let his family know that he is okay after everything that has happened. The Elven King tells Arthur that regardless of the past between their two kingdoms, Arthur saved their daughter. The king adds that Arthur brought Tesha all the way back, so he deserves a good reward, while the queen lovingly holds Tesha. However, the king explains that the special teleportation gate to Sapien Kingdom only opens once every 7 years for a big meeting. Arthur learns with a disappointed look that the gate won't open for another 5 years. The king then kindly offers to send a group of guards to safely escort Arthur back home whenever he wishes. The king further extends his hospitality, inviting Arthur to stay with them for a while. He mentions that while some elves are okay with humans, many still hold grudges from an old war, so for now, Arthur should make himself at home, and the escorts will be ready by tomorrow. Arthur thanks the king, looking grateful as he sits in a grand chair. This is the title page for the chapter, the beginning after the end. Arthur is led to a sparkling and luxurious room in the castle, looking tired but a little wide-eyed at the fancy surroundings. Feeling completely worn out, he heads straight for the bathroom to get clean. He steps into the shower, letting the water wash over him after his long journey. Suddenly, he collapses against the wall, realizing with alarm that the strange pain in his body is getting worse. Later, Arthur is resting on a luxurious sofa in his room, looking quite troubled. He wishes Sylvia was there to help him figure out what to do, when he hears a knock at his door. Arthur opens the door to find Princess Tesha standing there, looking very angry. Tesha immediately jumps at him, tackling him to the ground with a loud thud. She calls him a dummy, upset that he spoke coldly to her family and plans to leave so quickly. Arthur tries to explain that he was just being respectful to her royal parents, who are the king and queen. Tesha giggles playfully, and Arthur tells her to stop teasing him. She then becomes serious, telling him that she still doesn't want him to leave. Arthur smiles gently as Tesha nearly calls him her first friend. He then playfully calls her a crybaby princess and suggests she show him around the castle. Arthur asks Tesha to show him around the castle, and they start their tour. Tesha proudly leads him to what she calls her favorite place in the castle, a beautiful, arched hallway. She tells him that if he could stay until spring, he would see all the beautiful flowers blooming there. Arthur looks curious as Tesha points out some globies that are busy collecting nectar. Tesha crouches down and holds out her hands, showing Arthur the pretty, glowing insects she's gathered. She smiles brightly, holding the glowing creatures, while Arthur watches her with interest. As Arthur reaches out to touch the globies, something unexpected suddenly flashes towards them. A small, dark object zooms through the air, and Arthur quickly pulls Tesha out of the way. In a swift move, Arthur catches the flying object with his hand. He immediately throws the object back, striking an old man who is secretly watching them. Arthur holds on to Tesha protectively, looking surprised, as the old man simply greets him. Arthur is furious, demanding to know what the old man was thinking, trying to hurt his own granddaughter. The old man calmly explains that it was just a harmless toy that couldn't kill anyone, making Arthur realize he was fooled. Arthur wiggles the small, curved toy in his hand, feeling a bit silly, while the old man praises his quick reactions and instincts. The old man continues, saying Arthur's mana use is only average, but he understands how Arthur managed to defeat a few slave traders, making Arthur secretly think the old man is crazy. Tesha steps forward and scolds the old man, calling him grandpa and telling him to stop teasing Arthur, but her grandpa just casually asks, "Tease?" The grandpa then tells Arthur that he should already know the reason for his visit. Arthur nervously wonders why the old man came, while the grandpa remarks that he hasn't met anyone this interesting in a long time. Suddenly, the old man squats down and tosses a wooden sword towards Arthur. He challenges Arthur, wanting to see what the young boy is truly capable of. A lone wooden sword lay still, hinting at a moment of quiet before a flurry of action. Then, another wooden sword appeared, falling downwards, suggesting a practice fight was about to begin or had just taken a turn. Suddenly, Tesha gasped, calling out for her grandpa as he powered up, glowing with a bright blue light around him. Tesha's grandpa, Virian, smiled while still glowing, calling the boy Arthur a scary little brat with a hint of admiration. Arthur, holding his own wooden sword and also showing a faint blue glow, stood ready for the challenge, eyes focused. Arthur quickly moved to attack, making a swift slash with his sword, showing off his combat skills. Virian expertly dodged Arthur's quick attack, moving his body smoothly to avoid the hit. Arthur was caught off guard, realizing his attack missed its target. With a powerful thud, Virian landed a punch on Arthur, sending his sword flying away from his grasp. Virian's punch sent Arthur stumbling back, showing the big difference in their power. Arthur quickly recovered, using his agility to jump over Virian's next move, barely avoiding another hit, but Virian was too fast, catching Arthur and slamming him down with a loud bomb. To the ground. Arthur lay on the ground, knocked down, while his wooden sword rested nearby. Determined, Arthur quickly grabbed his sword again, ready to continue fighting. Arthur launched a series of fast slashes, his attacks now glowing with both red and blue energy. He kept up the rapid slash attacks, showing his strength and resolve. Arthur kept pressing his attacks, but Virian continued to dodge every single one gracefully. Arthur managed to block one of Virian's hits, but Virian quickly struck him again, overwhelming him with speed and power. Arthur struggled, realizing he just couldn't keep up with Virian's incredible pace, feeling outmatched. Despite being overwhelmed, Arthur spotted a tiny opening, a chance to turn the tie. Arthur cleverly tripped Virian, sending him stumbling back for a moment. As Virian lost his balance, Arthur used the chance to leap high into the air. In midair, Arthur snatched his falling sword, telling himself he needed to move even faster. Arthur managed to scratch Virian's face and then dramatically stabbed his sword into the ground, signaling the end of their intense spar. Arthur tumbled to the ground, tired but accomplished, as Tesha rushed over, worried about both her grandpa and Arthur. Arthur lay on the ground, catching his breath, as Virian touched the small scratch on his face, looking a bit surprised. Virian admitted he was a bit overconfident, but was genuinely impressed that Arthur actually managed to land a hit on him. Tesha playfully pinched her grandpa's ear, scolding him for bullying Arthur too much during their fight. Virian yelped in pain, then joked that if he had gone any easier, Arthur would have been the one bullying him instead. Arthur humbly thanked Virian for his kind words, but Virian's expression quickly turned serious, making Arthur wonder what was happening. Virian's sudden serious change in mood made Arthur confused and a little uneasy. Then Virian looked straight at Arthur and made a surprising offer. He asked Arthur to become his disciple. This was the beginning of a new chapter for Arthur, a major turning point in his journey. Tesha was completely confused by her grandpa's offer, while Virian waited for Arthur's answer. Arthur was still in shock. Arthur couldn't believe it, asking if Virian was serious, to which Virian simply asked why he wouldn't be. Arthur, still bewildered, pointed out that he was a human and wondered if humans were even allowed to stay in this kingdom. Virian confidently told Arthur that no one would dare challenge him if Arthur was under his protection, and praised Arthur's rare talent. Virian promised to teach Arthur unique abilities that even the most skilled mages couldn't, but Arthur still politely refused. Arthur explained that he couldn't accept right now because he deeply missed his parents and needed to let them know he was safe and alive. Virian offered a solution, suggesting he could find a way for Arthur to communicate with his family, which Tesha quickly agreed with. After a moment, Virian quickly sent Tesha away, telling her to get washed up and ready for bed. Virian then turned to Arthur, explaining his urgency stemmed from something he noticed during their spar, Arthur's recurring pain around his mana core. Arthur was shocked, asking Virian how he possibly knew about his secret mana core pains. Virian explained that not knowing the cause of his pain was a problem, and then asked Arthur if he knew what a beast will was. Arthur instantly recalled when Sylvia, the powerful mana beast, touched his core, realizing this was related to the power he had gained. Virian showed a diagram of different mana beast classes, explaining that powerful beasts class A or higher could pass on their unique will or ability. Virian stated that he wouldn't ask how Arthur got such a strong beast will, but warned him that at this point, the power was doing more harm than good to his body. Arthur, amazed by Virian's knowledge, then asked if Virian himself possessed a beast will. Virian confirmed it, proudly revealing that he was called a beast tamer, with a faint spiritual creature appearing behind him. He explained that beast tamer was a title earned only by fully mastering the monstrous beast will within oneself. Virian then showed Arthur a majestic, glowing spiritual creature, likely his own beast will, to further emphasize his point. Virian warned Arthur that returning to his family now was very dangerous because his young body couldn't handle the beast will's immense power. He stressed that if the power wasn't controlled quickly, Arthur faced a grave risk. Virian solemnly explained that the power inside Arthur would eventually destroy his body from the inside out. As he spoke, a glowing spiritual image of a dragon-like creature began to fade away, showing the ethereal nature of the beast will. The glowing fragments of the spiritual beast floated upwards, slowly disappearing into the air. Finally, only a single, distant light remained, a subtle reminder of the profound and dangerous power within Arthur. Arthur woke up feeling a strange, heavy weight pushing down on him. He wondered if this heavy feeling was his worries. In his sleepy state, he imagined a dark, shadowy monster hovering over him, like a real-life version of his troubles. The monster's face looked scary with glowing eyes and a wide, toothy grin. It felt like all his burdens and the expectations on him were haunting him even in his sleep. Just then, Tesha jumped onto his bed, shouting "Gee morning, Art. Wakey, wakey!" and jolting him awake. Still half asleep, Arthur mumbled for the shadow monster to give him 5 more minutes, making Tesha immediately offended. Once fully awake, Tesha teased Arthur about his messy, funny-looking hair. Arthur shot back, calling her Mini-Medusa because of her own wild hair. Tesha then excitedly asked if it was true he was going to stay there for good. Arthur replied that they would know for sure after his trip with Elder Virian. Tesha, annoyed by his non-committal answer, playfully punched him in the side. Arthur yelled at Tesha to stop, threatening to get angry. He then told her to leave so he could shower, adding with a smirk, "Unless you want to watch," which made her blush furiously. Tesha, flustered, called him perverted, making Arthur scold her to stop using words she barely understood. Later, Arthur walked down a grand staircase and overheard an argument where Tesha's father, Alduin, seemed upset. Alduin was insisting that it was not right for a human like Arthur to be living in their elven kingdom. Other elders agreed, saying that while they were grateful Arthur saved Tesha, letting a human stay went against their traditions. However, Elder Virian, Tesha's grandfather, cut them off, saying he liked Arthur and that was enough. Elder Virian even pointed out that Tesha herself approved of his decision, and Tesha enthusiastically nodded in agreement. Alduin tried to protest further, but Elder Virian firmly declared that Arthur would be under his direct care and everyone in the kingdom should know it. Arthur watched, smiling, and felt that the elder could truly be trusted with his safety. Suddenly, Elder Virian jokingly called Arthur a brat for being late and urged him to hurry into the waiting carriage. Inside the carriage, as it traveled through a lush forest, Arthur asked Elder Virian how much longer they had to go. Elder Virian playfully teased Arthur about how comfortable he had become, calling him Gramps. Arthur just smiled and said they would see how the day went with his mysterious friend. Elder Virian commented that Tesha had woken up extra early, bothering him about Arthur, and looked at Tesha sleeping peacefully next to Arthur. He thought about how Tesha, as the kingdom's only princess, had grown up very lonely and been hurt many times by adults and children who only pretended to be her friends. This caused her to build walls around herself, becoming cold and distant over time. But in the short time Arthur had been with her, she had shown more smiles and laughs than in all the past few years. Elder Virian felt a deep gratitude towards Arthur for bringing such joy to Tesha. Arthur sat there, unaware of Virian's thoughts, with Tesha comfortably asleep on his shoulder. A soft, warm light seemed to glow around them as their journey continued. With a sudden CHK, the carriage stopped and Tesha stirred awake, looking confused. Arthur peeked outside, asking if they had arrived, as they looked at a rustic, humble house nestled in a green, quiet area. Arthur wondered who this special friend was important enough for the former king to travel all the way to this simple, rural place. Elder Virian then loudly declared, "We're here, you old witch. Come out!" He proceeded to kick the door wide open with a loud thud, making Arthur and Tesha jump. An old woman, clearly annoyed, pushed the door back, telling Virian that her ears worked perfectly fine and he didn't need to shout like a grouch. Elder Virian then introduced her as Rinya Darkasson, an old friend and a special mage who could help Arthur. Arthur bowed respectfully and greeted Elder Rinya. Rinya, wasting no time, pointed inside and told them to stop standing outside and come in. Arthur and Tesha followed her into the house, Arthur still wondering how Rinya's unique magic could help him. He remembered that a deviant mage had powers that didn't fit into the 4 basic elements, similar to his own mother's abilities. Feeling a bit impatient, Arthur asked Rinya how exactly she planned to help him. He then directly asked if her magic could help him reach his parents, using the familiar Gramps for Virion. Rinya, in turn, playfully teased Virion for being called Grant by the boy. Rinya explained that she was a diviner, a type of mage with very capable magic, and noticed Virion's affection for Arthur. She said her power meant she could uncover nearly anything, and she knew Arthur was exceptionally special, so much so that even she couldn't see all parts of his life, though her eyes had seen bits of his past and future. Her eyes began to glow with vibrant, swirling colors, highlighting her powerful divining abilities. She clarified that Arthur wasn't there for her fortune-telling, but to see his parents and let them know he was alive. Arthur nodded, confirming she was right. Rinya then instructed him to lean forward and focus on the basin of water in front of them. She told him to concentrate on the image of his parents in his mind, making it as clear and detailed as possible. As Rinya placed her hand on Arthur's head, she explained that once he could see his parents in the water, he would be able to speak to them. Arthur gazed into the basin, which shimmered with a soft, inviting glow as he began to focus. He vividly pictured his mother, with her warm, glowing auburn hair and sun-kissed skin, her thin brows always knitted together with worry for him. Next, he imagined his father, with his strong blue eyes and goofy smile that brightened any day, remembering how his playful nature at home contrasted with his charisma as a leader. With all his heart, Arthur silently pleaded for them to be alive. His eyes filled with intense hope and emotion. Concentrating deeply on the magical water, he stared, pouring all his focus into the shimmering surface, desperate to see his parents. A steaming pot of beef stew was placed on the table, inviting everyone to dig in. Alice, who cooked the meal, watched as her husband, Reynolds, praised the amazing dish and wondered if there was a special reason for such a feast. Reynolds ate, telling her there was nothing special, just a nice meal. Alice smiled softly, explaining it had just been a while since she cooked a proper meal after they moved. They sat together, enjoying the quiet moment. However, a silent thought crossed her mind. This stew used to be their son Arthur's favorite dish. Reynolds noticed her quietness and asked if something was wrong, but Alice quickly brushed it off, hiding her feelings. Suddenly, a voice echoed in their minds, startling the pregnant Alice and Reynolds. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." Reynolds and Alice looked at each other, shocked, as the voice continued, revealing itself. "It's me, your son Arthur." Reynolds' hand trembled, and the spoon slipped, scattering food onto the table in his disbelief. The spoon clattered down as the shocking news settled, marking a new chapter in their lives. Arthur's voice then explained that his parents must be very surprised to hear him inside their heads, promising to explain everything later. For now, he just wanted them to know one thing: he was alive and safe. He recounted how he barely survived a terrible fall from a cliff, showing a glimpse of his struggle. Arthur then revealed that he was secretly staying with the elves in the kingdom of Elenwar, where he was recovering. He acknowledged how difficult things must have been for his parents, remembering a time he was being cared for in a carriage. He also shared that it had been hard for him too, but he was happy to know his mom and dad were both okay, showing a memory of his own struggles and fights. With a serious tone, Arthur pleaded with them not to blame each other for what had happened. He declared he was proud of his actions and would do it all again, even if it meant dying, as rain fell over a desolate landscape. Arthur expressed a wish to be with them, but admitted it was not possible right now, recalling a tender moment of comfort in the rain. He explained that he had an illness that needed treatment, showing a grand, light-filled building where he was headed. Inside the building, guarded by soldiers, Arthur assured them he was not in danger but needed to get well before coming home. He wasn't sure when he could reach out again like this, as he and his companions continued their journey. Arthur and an older man approached a large house where he mentioned a mage similar to his mother. He explained that this mage was the one making it possible for them to hear his voice, then promised his dad he would keep practicing magic and fighting. Arthur playfully warned his dad not to be surprised if he could beat him in a fight the next time they met, showing a scene of soldiers. Then his voice softened as he told them, until then, while his parents sat together on a couch, his mom pregnant, his final message to his dad was to keep his mom and the baby safe. Back in their home, Reynolds' eyes welled up with tears, unable to hold back his emotions. Alice, equally overwhelmed, began to cry softly, calling out her husband's name. Arthur's voice came through again, saying "Mom, Dad," as Alice collapsed to the floor, tears streaming, while he added, "I love you both." Alice and Reynolds held each other tightly, both crying happy tears, as Arthur's voice gave his final words, "Take care until I get back." A magical bowl of water showed a faint, distorted reflection of the embracing parents, a visual representation of their connection. The reflection faded, leaving only ripples on the water's surface, signaling the end of the communication. Meanwhile, a young Arthur, far away, let a single tear drip into the water, reflecting his sadness. More tears fell from Arthur's eyes into the bowl, while an elder elf watched over him with a thoughtful expression. With red-rimmed eyes, the young Arthur looked up, ready to face whatever came next, declaring, "I'm ready." Arthur and Princess Tesha were at a grand palace, with important people all around. A fancy carriage waited outside the big doors. As Arthur stood with the princess, an older man coughed loudly to get everyone's attention. The older man, who was the king, told Arthur that he might seem a bit old-fashioned and stubborn because he had been king for many years. The queen then stepped forward, gently telling Arthur that the king was trying to say they were sorry for earlier and that Arthur should consider this place his own home. The king then added that Arthur was very important, being the savior of his daughter and the very first student of his own father, Elder Virion. He properly welcomed Arthur once more. The king kindly extended his hand toward Arthur, offering a formal handshake. Arthur respectfully shook the king's hand, accepting his welcome. Just as Arthur thanked the king for his kindness, Princess Tesha quickly cut in. Princess Tesha insisted that if they were truly sorry to Arthur, they should let them go outside and play so she could show him around the city. This chapter is called The Beginning After the End. Dressed in a pretty hat, Princess Tesha excitedly called out to Arthur, ready to go, and he looked just as eager. Rose petals floated around Tesha as she stood happily, ready for their adventure. Arthur, Tesha, and their escorts walked through a busy street, looking around the lively city. Suddenly, Arthur accidentally bumped into a boy and quickly said sorry, but the boy reacted with disgust. The rude boy loudly complained that he got human germs on him, which completely confused Arthur and Tesha. The boy, surrounded by his friends, pointed at Arthur and questioned if he thought he belonged there just because Elder Virion liked him. Princess Tesha wanted to leave the awkward situation, but Arthur felt like this rude boy was a total cliché and decided he wanted to tease him a bit. The boy then introduced himself as Fairith of Saruman II, telling the princess it was beneath her to be with a simple human and offered to escort her himself. Arthur held back a laugh, listening to the boy's boastful words. Arthur pretended to be very impressed by Fairith Ivisor, which made the boy angrily correct him about the pronunciation of his name. Arthur then put on a fake surprised face, saying he had no idea he was in the presence of such amazing genius, making Fairith very mad. Arthur continued his sarcasm, promising that this bug would remember to give proper respect, while Tesha covered her face, trying not to laugh. Arthur then said, "Now, if you'll excuse us," and started to walk away with Tesha. But Fairith quickly shouted stop, and ran to block their path. He had understood Arthur's sarcasm. Arthur gave a slight smirk, realizing the boy wasn't as foolish as he first thought. Fairith loudly declared that for the honor of his family, the Ivsar house, he would fight. He dramatically threw down a piece of cloth, challenging Arthur to a duel right there. Arthur looked shocked, but Tesha quickly got angry, scolding Fairith for daring to challenge Elder Virion's student. Fairith bowed slightly to the princess, apologizing, but stated that his father taught him never to let anyone walk over his pride. He then turned to Arthur, telling him to either accept the duel or run away like a scared animal. Arthur wondered if duels were a really serious thing in this place, while Fairith warned that Arthur's choice would also affect his teacher. Fairith then took Arthur's silence as an agreement to the duel and asked Princess Tesha to officially start it. Princess Tesha reluctantly raised her hand, preparing to begin the duel. The crowd watched quietly, eager to see what would happen next. Fairith's friends looked confident and excited, expecting their friend to win. Princess Tesha finally called out, "Start," and Fairith quickly told Arthur to get ready. Fairith immediately launched forward to attack, but Arthur moved incredibly fast. With a quick punch, Arthur struck Fairith right in the face. Fairith was sent flying back and landed on the ground with a loud thud, completely defeated. The arrogant Fairith lay motionless on the ground, defeated in a single hit. Tesha seemed surprised it was over so quickly, but Arthur just smiled, having known this would happen. She grabbed his hand. Tesha, laughing happily, pulled Arthur and yelled, "Run!" As they quickly left the scene, Arthur thought to himself that he was starting to like this little princess more and more. He remembered their fun day exploring, feeling refreshed and taking his mind off serious things. They continued their adventure, looking at interesting stalls in the market. Arthur and Tesha stood together, watching the busy market life around them. Later, they stood on a high bridge, admiring the beautiful view of the city. Princess Tesha turned to Arthur and asked him if he felt nervous about his training, which was supposed to start the next day. Arthur looked out, his expression thoughtful, as he considered her question. Elder Virion then spoke to Arthur, his expression serious. He warned Arthur that his new lessons would not be easy and that the pain he felt in his monic horror would be nothing compared to what was coming. Virion explained that the process beast tamers go through, called assimilation, felt like being dipped into boiling tar. He also told Arthur that he would be alone in a new land without his family, and even simple daily life would become very hard. But then, Virion offered a small smile, saying that if Arthur could handle all the hardships, the reward would be truly amazing. Virion then directly asked Arthur if he was ready for such a challenging journey. Arthur, looking out at the vast world, confidently said that he was excited for it. He clenched his fist, thinking about how far he had come for this training and the chance to see his parents again. Arthur felt excited for everything that was yet to come in his journey. The view showed a breathtaking landscape of the elven city, with ancient structures built into the mountains. Arthur expressed his deep anticipation, saying he couldn't wait to see what the future held for him in this incredible world. The light glowed brightly, hinting at the powerful magic and new adventures that awaited Arthur. 3 years passed by in a flash, and now Tesha was trying to wake Arthur up. She called his name, ready to get him moving for the day. Tesha then yelled that they would be late and twisted Arthur's ankle using her mana, making him cry out in pain. Arthur quickly surrendered, telling her to stop, and Tesha released his ankle, looking a bit miffed. He complained that she used mana to hurt his ankle and asked if she could find a gentler way to wake him up. Tesha blamed him for not waking up when she asked nicely the first time. She then gave a confident smile. Tesha playfully reminded Arthur that he should be grateful that a pretty girl like her was even waking him up, to which Arthur mumbled that the maids were plenty pretty too. Tesha's face instantly turned serious, demanding if he had said something. As they walked up the stairs, she pressed him about thinking a maid was pretty, but Arthur just told her to give it a rest. Their grandfather, Virion, met them, remarking that they took long enough and told them to get ready for their lesson. This was the chapter title card for the beginning after the end. The world's magic was based on 4 basic elements: water, wind, earth, and fire, which also had higher forms. These higher elements, like ice, gravity, lightning, and sound, could only be used by mages who had completely mastered their basic elements. These mages were called deviants. Dwarves mainly used earth and fire, having a much stronger connection to these elements compared to humans. Very skilled dwarves could even manipulate magma, while elves were limited to water, wind, and earth, but also with a much higher natural affinity than humans. Sometimes, elves could even become a special type of deviant who could control plants, but they couldn't learn the higher forms of water, wind, and earth magic. Human mages, on the other hand, could use any of the 4 basic elements and were the only ones who could become deviants in any of those elements, or even unique anomalies like healers. This diversity of abilities created a delicate power balance between the 3 races. This balance took into account their total population, their natural connection to magic, and the different types of mages each race could produce. After explaining this, Arthur asked Virion if his explanation was good enough, while Tesha lay tired on the ground and Virion practiced with a sword. Virion considered it for a moment, then said it was passable, as Arthur knelt beside Tesha, both looking exhausted from their training. Tesha, raising her hand, suddenly had a question for Virion. She asked why Arthur wasn't physically training like her to get his body ready for his beast will, suggesting it might be better. Arthur reflected on how much the differences between the races had become clear over the past 3 years. He remembered that humans were considered talented if they awakened their magic in their late teens, but elves often awakened as early as 10. For Tesha, it happened even sooner, when she was just 9 years old. Virion then teasingly asked Tesha if she was upset about getting beaten up during training, and she admitted yes. Arthur observed that since then, Tesha had been learning conjuring from a tutor and fighting skills from her grandfather, making him think Virion should be gentler with her. He thought Tesha would become incredibly strong, though he himself was doing an unusual type of training, fusing his bones, muscles, and organs with mana instead of physical exercise. Virion reassured Tesha that Arthur's body would be incredibly tough and strong after this process. Tesha, still curious, then asked why Arthur still felt so sensitive when she hit him. Arthur quickly interjected that he still felt pain. Virion smiled, commenting that even after 3 years of mana fusion, Arthur still had plenty of energy. Virion then turned to Arthur and asked if he was ready for the next step, and Arthur looked at him with determination. Virion told Arthur that after today, he would become a true beast tamer, not like those who simply use their beast's power as a tool. He prepared to ignite Arthur's mana core. Virion placed his hand on Arthur, explaining he would insert a lot of his own mana to light up Arthur's core, and it would feel warm, but not too bad. However, as the mana flowed, Arthur screamed in agony, a bright golden light starting to glow from him. The light from Arthur's core grew intensely bright, overwhelming him. With a massive boom, a powerful blast of light erupted, throwing Virion and Tesha far away. Both Virion and Tesha were violently slammed back by the magical explosion. Dazed and slightly injured, Virion and Tesha looked around in shock, wondering what had just happened. Virion, now worried, called out for Arthur, looking for him amidst the fading light. Arthur was lying on the ground, seemingly okay, but Tesha still asked if he was alright, and he confirmed he was fine, though still recovering. Virion, with a serious expression, admitted he knew Arthur had kept a secret, but insisted on asking again what kind of beast had given its will to him. Arthur, looking exhausted but calm, revealed the beast was a dragon. Virion was utterly stunned, repeating dragon? In disbelief, while Tesha looked equally surprised. Virion's shock turned to amazement as he realized Arthur was a genuine dragon tamer, unable to believe he had actually trained a real dragon. Arthur lay resting, slowly recovering from the intense process. Later, Virion sat by Arthur's bedside, asking him how he was feeling after the ordeal. Arthur cheekily asked Virion how he was feeling, recalling that Virion had gone a bit wild before passing out. Virion just coughed and said he had calmed down. Arthur asked Virion to keep the dragon's secret even after he left, and Virion agreed. Then, Virion delivered surprising news. Arthur's departure was set for just 4 months away. Arthur was completely surprised, as he thought he still had 2 more years. Virion explained that an interracial tournament for young mages from the 3 kingdoms had finally been confirmed. This tournament meant that the portals in Zyra's city would be open, allowing access to both the Elenwar and Darv kingdoms. Arthur was excited, then looked a little confused. Arthur asked if Tesha wasn't there because Virion wanted to tell him the news alone. Virion told him not to worry about Tesha. Virion reassured Arthur that while he had been checking on his family through Renina for years, he would now finally be able to see them in person. Arthur acknowledged this, but still found 4 months to be very soon. Virion gently ruffled Arthur's hair, promising him that his training would become even tougher now that his mana assimilation was complete, making him wish the 4 months would pass quickly. Virion then left Arthur's room, telling him to get some rest and that he would break the news to Tesha gently. Arthur was left alone contemplating the short 4-month timeline when his eyes landed on something nearby. To his surprise, the colorful orb, which was his beast will, suddenly cracked, startling Arthur. The strange stone that Arthur had been carrying for so long suddenly began to crack. It looked like Sylvia's stone was about to do something truly unexpected. Arthur watched in disbelief as more and more cracks spread across the colorful surface of the object. He wondered if the stone was breaking apart or if something else was happening. As the cracks grew wider, a bright, golden light shone from inside the egg. Then, a single, slitted eye peeked out from within the shell. Arthur's eyes widened in utter shock as he finally understood. The stone from Sylvia was never a stone at all. It was an egg. More cracks appeared, and soon, a small, dark creature began to push its way out of the shell. It was slowly hatching right before his very eyes. A tiny limb emerged from the egg, indicating that the creature was fully breaking free. It was clear now that a baby dragon was being born. The little black creature finally managed to wiggle out of its shell, shaking itself off before letting out an adorable yawn. It was truly a baby dragon. The newborn dragon wobbled and tumbled, falling onto its back. Arthur looked on, completely flustered and unsure how to handle this new, unexpected arrival. This remarkable event marked a surprising new chapter in Arthur's journey, as he now found himself with an incredible responsibility. His story continued to unfold with this magical creature. Arthur carefully picked up the tiny dragon, looking at it with a mix of wonder and disbelief. The little creature stared back at him with its bright, curious eyes. The small dragon gently nudged his hands, seeming to recognize Arthur's presence. It was a sweet moment between the two. Arthur asked the creature if it was a dragon, and it responded with a happy caillou. He was amazed that he could somehow understand its unique language. Arthur couldn't help but smile, finding the baby dragon incredibly cute. He felt a deep, warm feeling growing inside him toward this new companion. Suddenly, the cute dragon chomped down on Arthur's arm, startling him completely. He let out a yelp of surprise from the unexpected bite. Arthur winced as he looked at the small, swirling mark the dragon's bite had left on his arm. The tiny dragon just clung there, making a soft nigh tilde sound. He rubbed his arm, examining the unusual mark. It wasn't just a simple bite. it looked more like an intricate symbol had been pressed into his skin. The mark on Arthur's arm was detailed and complex, far too intricate for a regular bite. It appeared to be a significant, mystical brand. To Arthur's utter astonishment, the dragon then called out Mama directly into his mind. He was completely bewildered by this telepathic communication. The dragon continued to call him Mama in his thoughts, making Arthur even more confused about their mental connection. He couldn't believe what was happening. Arthur, still trying to process everything, lay in bed, wondering who the dragon thought its mama was. The little creature just cooed and repeated the word. He finally realized the dragon was communicating with him directly inside his head. This mental link was truly an extraordinary ability. Arthur gently told the dragon that he was a boy and it should call him Papa instead. The dragon seemed to understand, purring softly in response. Thinking of Sylvia, Arthur decided to name the little dragon Sylvie in honor of its mother. He felt a strong sense of responsibility for her. Sylvie loved the name, responding with an enthusiastic "Caillou" and showing her approval. Arthur was happy that she liked the name he chose. Arthur then understood that the mark on his arm was more than just a bite, it was a special bond connecting him directly to Sylvie. This mark felt like a powerful, magical link between them. Arthur found it amusing that at only 8 years old, he had a mysterious tattoo and was now essentially a father to a dragon. He felt like a true rebel for his age. After all the excitement, Arthur and Sylvie eventually settled down and fell asleep peacefully in the comfortable bed. It was a calm end to a very eventful day. The night passed quietly, as Arthur continued to rest, unaware that his peace would soon be interrupted. Suddenly, Arthur woke up with a loud scream, startled by a commotion. His sleep was violently broken by an unexpected intruder. He quickly sat up, looking around his dark room in confusion, demanding to know who was there. He was quite annoyed his sleep was disturbed. It turned out to be Tesha, who had somehow gotten into his room and was happily cuddling Sylvie, thinking she was just a cute, exotic pet. Arthur looked completely shocked. The beautiful, ornate windows silently overlooked the scene, witnessing the unusual events unfolding inside Arthur's room. Tesha playfully pulled Arthur's blanket off him, still holding Sylvie, who mentally called out Papa. Arthur just wanted to go back to his peaceful sleep. Later, as they walked through a grand hallway, Tesha expressed her envy that Arthur could communicate with Sylvie through his mind. She wished Sylvie would like her too. Arthur playfully told Tesha that Sylvie might like her more if she stopped looking at her like she was food. Then, he spotted Virion, their gramps, approaching. Arthur excitedly called out to Virion, inviting him to come and see his amazing new pet, Sylvie. Virion looked up, curious about what Arthur was so excited about. Virion looked at them sternly at first, but then his eyes widened in absolute shock when he saw Sylvie. He started to stammer, barely able to speak. Virion was utterly shocked to see the baby dragon perched on Arthur's head, nearly fainting from the surprise. Arthur, however, was already used to the constant drama. After Arthur explained everything about Sylvie and her origins to Virion, he learned something important. Creatures like Sylvie usually only hatch when their own kind are present. They all tried to understand why Sylvie had hatched in front of Arthur, a human, instead of another dragon. Tesha, still reeling from the shock, lay passed out on the ground. The only reason they could come up with was that Arthur had fully activated Sylvia's dragon will the day before. This powerful surge of magic somehow triggered Sylvie's hatching. Arthur asked if he would need to hide Sylvie back home, but Virion assured him it was fine. He advised Arthur to simply pretend she was a rare mana beast, as most people wouldn't know her true powerful nature. Virion then placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder, telling him that he had much more important things to focus on. They had deliberately held back on strengthening his mana core during his assimilation. Now that Arthur had fully awakened, Virion explained, it was time to train both his mana core and his newly acquired dragon will. Arthur eagerly asked what he needed to do. Virion smirked and told Arthur that the best way to unlock the first stage of his beast will, while also strengthening his mana core, was through constant combat. He then tossed a sword to Arthur. As Virion tossed him a sword, he emphasized the need to constantly engage in fighting. Arthur agreed, understanding that intense battles would be crucial for his growth. Virion further explained that fighting a beast tamer who could use different stages of their beast will would help Arthur even more. Arthur looked confused, wondering what kind of opponent he meant. Suddenly, a massive, shadowy beast with glowing eyes appeared, letting out a terrifying roar. Arthur watched in shock as the powerful creature materialized before him. The beast's thunderous roar created a powerful gust of wind, blowing both Arthur and a recovering Tesha backward. Arthur instinctively crossed his arms to defend himself. The monstrous, shadowy form then began to shift and transform, gradually changing into a dark, human-like figure. An ominous feeling filled the air. The transformation completed, revealing a powerful, dark figure with fierce, glowing yellow eyes. This was the beast tamer Virion had been talking about. The imposing figure looked directly at Arthur and challenged him to a fight, declaring that it was time to begin their battle. Arthur's true, tough training was about to start. These tamers are mages who can use special powers they get from mana beasts. They connect with these magical creatures to gain abilities. The first step for a beast tamer is called the acquire phase. In this phase, the tamer can borrow some of their beast's natural strengths, like being faster or stronger. But the real power comes in the second step, the integrate phase. Here, the mage can fully use their beast's unique skills and features, becoming much more powerful and even changing their appearance. For Virion, it was a big deal. He had studied his beast's wool for many decades to reach this second stage. Now, in his integrate phase, Virion could use the dangerous abilities of a shadow panther, transforming into a shadowy, powerful form. One day, Virion, in his panther form, told Arthur to pay close attention as he would try to sneak up on him. Arthur was surprised and irritated, wondering if Virion could truly sneak up on him even after giving a warning. Virion suddenly moved with incredible speed, vanishing in a puff of smoke. Arthur could only react to how fast he was. Before Arthur could even blink, Virion appeared behind him, lightly tapping his shoulder with a shadowy claw. Arthur spun around, completely shocked and bewildered by Virion's speed and stealth. Virion's dark, intimidating form loomed over Arthur, creating an intense, dreadful feeling. Arthur gulped, clearly intimidated and a little scared by Virion's overwhelming presence. Arthur quickly gave up, admitting he couldn't even react to Virion's speed at this level, and called his panther form trauma-inducing. Virion, now back in his human-like form but still with panther features, nodded, saying he had been told his form was quite something. He also explained that while powerful, the integrate phase wasn't perfect and still took a lot of energy out of him. Arthur was impressed not just by Virion's speed, but also by how he couldn't feel his presence at all, which Virion explained was a shadow panther's ability to manipulate wind and sound. Virion then decided he had bullied Arthur enough for the day and suggested they finally start some actual training. Virion presented Arthur with a scroll, likely containing instructions or a new lesson for their ongoing training. Days quickly turned into weeks, with Arthur completely focused on his training and getting stronger. With Virion's guidance and his own hard work, Arthur managed to unlock the first stage of his dragon whale. Virion also taught Arthur how to hide his special beast wool from other mages, a useful skill for staying unnoticed. Arthur also meditated with Tesha during this time. When Arthur wasn't busy strengthening his mana core or studying Sylvia's dragon will, he was often sparring with Virion, learning to fight better. Luckily, his body could handle all the intense training. During his free time, Arthur tried to enjoy being a child, just like Sylvia had wanted him to, playing and having fun. Arthur walked happily alongside Virion, enjoying the simple moments and looking forward to his future. Arthur felt a sense of peace, smiling as he balanced his intense training with moments of childhood joy. But soon, the day of departure arrived, and it was tough for Tesha, who looked very sad. Tesha was clearly distressed, standing on the red carpet while Virion and others watched Arthur prepare to leave. Arthur found it very hard to break the news of his leaving to Tesha, who had spent every day with him for the past few years, comforting her as she cried on her bed. Arthur realized his plan was working. He confirmed that Grandma Sylvia's special feather was doing a good job of hiding Sylvie's mark, keeping his bond a secret. Virion gently tapped Arthur on the shoulder, signaling that it was almost time to go. Virion told Arthur his carriage was waiting and gave him a beautiful, intricate golden locket, asking him to hold onto it. He explained that the locket had the Iralith house crest and would help Arthur find his way through the forest. Arthur thanked him sincerely. Virion then joked that Arthur could always find another princess to lead him back, which made Tesha gasp in shock and Arthur feel embarrassed. Virion quickly pulled Tesha closer, assuring them it was just a joke and that they would all see each other again soon. Tesha, looking determined, nodded, promising to become stronger than Virion the next time they met. Arthur gave Tesha a warm hug, telling her he would miss her and wished her to stay safe. Tesha hugged him back tightly, looking very sad about his departure. She started to cry, saying she would miss him terribly too. Arthur waved goodbye to everyone from inside the carriage as it began to move. He continued to wave, watching his friends and Virion get smaller as the carriage pulled away from the grand building. Inside the carriage, another elf noticed Arthur and greeted him, sounding a bit surprised. The elf called Arthur the human brat and asked if he had been kicked out of the kingdom, but Arthur looked confused and didn't remember him. The elf angrily explained he was the noble Arthur had beaten unfairly in a duel, arguing that true duels were about magic, and the challenger should always strike first. Arthur suddenly recognized him, remembering his name was Ivysaur. The elf introduced himself as Fairith Asura Roman III, complaining that he was just a naive child when Arthur defeated him unfairly, and challenged him to fight again now. Arthur grabbed Fairith's hand, apologized for bullying him before, and said it was good to see him again. Another companion in the carriage whispered to Arthur that they all secretly called Fairith Fafi. Fairith's face turned red, and he shouted at them not to tell Arthur his embarrassing nickname. Arthur just sat back and smiled, enjoying the lively chatter with his new traveling companions. The carriage, now high in the sky, was flying smoothly through the clouds, making a soft whirring sound. Everyone inside seemed relaxed, enjoying the unique journey as they soared above the world. Suddenly, the drivers announced that they had finally arrived at their destination. Arthur peered out the window with wide eyes, excited to see where they had landed. He saw a bustling city below, full of houses and carriages, and wondered if his mom and dad were there. They had arrived at the incredible floating city of Xyrus, an impressive sight suspended high in the sky. The vast, clear blue sky stretched above, with gentle white birds flying freely. A busy town buzzed with people talking and moving around, with a grand building standing tall in the middle. More crowds filled the streets, everyone chatting and going about their day, creating a lively atmosphere. A beautiful, big manor stood quietly as carriages passed by, signaling a specific destination. Arthur walked toward the grand manor, pulling his luggage behind him, finally reaching his family's home. At the door, Arthur told Sylvie they were finally home and asked if she was ready for the big moment. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Arthur remembered all the hard things he went through, nearly dying and losing someone important. He also recalled having to fight and kill, like when he faced a powerful beast. He thought about the long, intense training he had done, working hard to become stronger. But even after all that, nothing made him as nervous as waiting for this door to open, hearing a little girl's voice from inside. An old maid opened the door, kindly asking Arthur if she could help him. Arthur politely bowed and introduced himself as Arthur Lewin, saying he was informed his family lived here. The maid was shocked to hear the name Lewin, and a little girl with pigtails, Elinor, peeked out from behind her. Arthur's mother, Alice, came rushing down the stairs, calling for Elinor. Alice started to scold Elinor for greeting strangers at the door, but her words stopped when she saw Arthur. Alice's eyes widened in shock, and the tray of food she was holding clattered to the floor. Arthur just stood there, his heart full of emotion as he looked at his mother. The dropped food lay scattered, and Arthur realized the little girl was his younger sister, Elinor. Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away, trying to keep his voice steady as he greeted his mother. Alice burst into tears and ran toward Arthur, her arms wide open, desperate to hug her son. They embraced tightly, both crying as they finally reunited after so much time apart. Alice held Arthur close, crying with joy, repeating that she knew it was him and that her baby was finally home. Little Elinor also started to cry, telling her mama not to be sad. Suddenly, loud thumping sounds were heard from deeper inside the house. Arthur's father, Reynolds, came running through the front door, having heard all the commotion. Reynolds cried out Arthur's name, tears streaming down his face as he saw his son. Reynolds rushed toward Arthur, ready to join the emotional family reunion, with the maid looking on happily. He pulled Arthur into a tight hug, his own tears mixing with his son's as they held each other close. The whole family, including Elinor and the maid, shared a group hug, all overcome with emotion and relief. This is the story of the beginning after the end, presented by TurtleMe and Fayuki23. Later, as they sat down, Alice worriedly asked Arthur about his illness and whether he was eating enough, but Arthur assured her he was fine. Reynolds told his wife not to ask so many questions and pointed out how much bigger and stronger their son had become. Alice then gently encouraged Elinor to go say hello to her big brother. Elinor, a little shy, slowly looked up at Arthur, while Sylvie watched quietly from the sofa. Their mother explained to Elinor that this was the brother from the bedtime stories she and her daddy told her. Elinor finally smiled and shyly greeted her big bewoter. Arthur thought about his journey, filled with tough battles, losses, and intense training. He knelt down and greeted Elinor warmly, saying he was happy to finally meet his sister. After everyone had settled down, Arthur spent some time telling his parents everything that had happened since he left. He explained his survival from the cliff fall was due to luck and unconscious magic, keeping Sylvia a secret, then shared about recovering in the kingdom of Elenoir. Reynolds then asked about Sylvie, and Arthur explained he found her as a baby after her mother, a mana beast, died from an injury. Alice asked again if he was truly healed from his illness, and Arthur explained it was just an unstable mana core from awakening early, assuring her there was nothing to worry about now. Arthur felt bad for hiding some secrets, but he knew it was too dangerous for his family to know everything until he became much stronger. Reynolds suddenly got very excited and loudly asked Arthur what stage his mana core was at now. Alice quickly scolded Reynolds for asking about mana core stages right after Arthur came home, but Reynolds said it was natural to compare their growth. Reynolds proudly announced he had been working as an instructor for guards and showed off his new muscles. Arthur teased his father about more than just his facial hair growing, then asked about his dad's current mana core stage. Reynolds proudly declared that he had broken through to the dark orange stage 2 years ago, feeling very good about his progress. Arthur was impressed, noting how much bulkier his father had gotten and that he had indeed reached the next stage. Arthur complimented his father's hard work, and Reynolds struck a proud pose, beaming. Reynolds, still boasting, then asked Arthur about his mana core, and Arthur quietly replied, "Light red." Reynolds' jaw dropped in utter shock, yelling "Light red?" in disbelief at his son's incredible achievement. Eleanor, hearing her father, innocently copied him, saying "Shet," which made Alice sigh. Alice sternly reminded Reynolds about cursing in front of Eleanor, while Reynolds quickly told Ellie not to repeat the bad word. Still reeling from the light red news, Reynolds immediately challenged Arthur, saying they were going to the backyard to spar right then and there. Eleanor continued to innocently repeat the swear word while Arthur and his mother just laughed at the whole situation. Arthur felt a warmth spread through him, happy to be back home with his loving and slightly crazy family. Next time, Reynolds warns Arthur to be ready, saying his father is not the same man he used to be. Reynolds clenched his fist, ready to show Arthur how much stronger he had become. Arthur smiled, confidently replying that he wasn't the same either, promising an exciting and powerful fight between father and son. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed as someone rushed through the house, yelling for Ray. Vincent burst into the room, looking shocked, and asked Ray what was happening, clearly surprised by a sudden announcement about his son. Still looking confused, Vincent stood by the doorway with his wife, Tabitha, and their daughter, Lilia. Arthur observed the family, understanding that these were the kind people who had been taking care of his family all this time. Ray introduced Arthur to Vincent and Tabitha, explaining that Vincent was an old friend who ran the Helsia auction house and that this was their home. Arthur politely greeted them. Arthur apologized for the confusion, explaining he had specifically asked for his survival to be kept a secret. Tabitha playfully teased if Arthur was really Ray's son, leading Ray to give her a gentle nudge. Tabitha warmly welcomed Arthur and introduced her daughter, Lilia, hoping the two children would become friends. Arthur smiled and waved, with his bond partner Sylve also giving a cute wave which made Lilia's heart flutter. Lilia shyly asked if she could pet Sylve. Vincent then asked Ray what he meant earlier about wrecking his house, and Ray explained that he and Arthur were about to spar outside. Vincent looked bewildered, trying to process the idea of Ray and young Arthur sparring. A little later, Vincent watched from the doorway, completely surprised that Ray and Arthur were actually sparring. Everyone gathered outside, watching as Ray and Arthur prepared to begin their practice fight on the spacious lawn. Ray stretched, getting ready, while Arthur smiled back confidently, also preparing himself. Alice, Tabitha, and Lilia, with Sylve on her lap, watched the two men from the steps. Vincent leaned over to Alice, asking if Ray was serious about Arthur being a light red core mage. Alice confirmed it, saying Arthur was a fast learner and had no reason to lie. Vincent found it hard to believe that an 8-year-old had not only awakened but advanced 3 stages, noting that even older genius mages were barely at the dark red stage. Arthur thought to himself that he shouldn't reveal his actual core stage was light red because he was busy assimilating Sylvia's beast will. Meanwhile, Ray warned Arthur to be ready, as he was much stronger than before. Ray's body pulsed with mana as he got into a fighting stance, his fist clenched tight. Arthur, with a confident smirk, also got ready, telling his father that he, too, had changed. Ray suddenly dashed forward, moving with incredible speed, leaving a trail of mana behind him. Ray launched a powerful kick, followed by a swift punch that connected with Arthur, showing his impressive speed and strength. Ray smirked, telling Arthur he would need to try much harder to keep up. Arthur skillfully dodged Ray's next attack with a quick movement. Arthur tried to grab Ray, but Ray was too fast, catching Arthur's arm and expertly spinning him around. Ray effortlessly swung Arthur over his shoulder, demonstrating his overwhelming physical prowess. Arthur managed to twist out of Ray's hold and land gracefully on his feet. Arthur stood up, a mischievous grin on his face, and asked his father what he thought of that. Ray admitted that Arthur had caught him off guard with his moves. Ray declared that he was going to get serious now, and his body began to glow with intense mana. Ray revealed that he had learned a new trick after reaching the dark orange stage, warning Arthur not to underestimate him. Flames erupted around Ray's hands and chest, showing his mastery over fire magic as he prepared for the next phase of their spar. The story's title, The Beginning After the End, appeared on screen, signaling a deeper dive into the world's magic system. It was explained that mages are born with natural elemental strengths or affinities, and parents often get their children tested to guide their magical training. The image showed a child pondering elemental choices. The narration continued, explaining that conjurers can directly manifest and control their element, while augmenters have a more subtle connection, only manifesting elements after reaching a certain threshold. Different mages were shown in battle, displaying their elemental powers, like ice from a conjurer and a fiery burst from an augmenter. For augmenters, it was stated, actual elemental manifestation only occurs after they cross a specific power level, which Ray had now done. Arthur reflected on his father, who had trained hard since childhood but without formal teaching, only managing to ignite actual fire from his mana when he reached the orange core stage. Arthur compared this to his past life, where elemental paths were chosen, not born. In a flashback to his previous life, Arthur was shown as a skilled warrior, wielding a glowing sword against multiple foes. He continued to reflect that in his past world, talent was a big part of mastery, but hard work was equally important, as people weren't limited to just one element. Another glimpse of Arthur's past self showed him in battle, delivering a decisive strike with his sword. Back in the present, Arthur thought about all the advantages he possessed in this new world, as the onlookers watched the fight with growing surprise. Arthur then declared that he, too, had learned a trick or two since arriving in this world. Suddenly, sparks of electricity began to crackle around Arthur, highlighting his newfound power. Arthur looked at his father with a confident smile, electricity surging around him, telling him not to be too surprised. A short message appeared, inviting viewers to follow the creators on Instagram. The observers, including Alice, Tabitha, and Vincent, looked completely shocked by Arthur's powerful display. Ray was thrown back by an unseen force, looking stunned. Arthur thought about how his father's punches were becoming sharper and he was using his reach, making it harder